Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto wins Anko in a bet. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Come on Kurenai, don't be such a stick in the mud. A dark violet hair woman with brown pupil-less eyes called to her companion, a woman with a long mane of black hair and red eyes that have a ring of darker red closer to her pupil. The women were an odd pair. The younger, brown-eyed girl wearing a form-fitting outfit of a dark gray material covered in chain mail, a tanned trench coat with a lavender lining, an orange skirt that didn't make it to mid-thigh, shin guards over her blue sandals, and a forehead protector with a stylized leaf with a swirl in the middle on her head that was used to help hold her hair back in a spiky ponytail. Her companion, the black-haired woman, was much more modest in her dress, wearing a deep, rich red outfit with no sleeves underneath a standard military outfit of the village the pair lived in, and a dark leaf green flak jacket with a red spiral on the back. Anko, I have no intention in losing my shirt in another of your get-quick-rich schemes, Kurenai said in an exasperated fashion to her younger friend, annoyed at the memory of the last time she had helped Anko out with one of her plans. What you talking about, cuckoo? Losing your shirt got Asuma then to look at you, right? Anko replied with a leer and smirk. At least, bits of you got looked at. Bits I didn't want him seeing yet, Kurenai shot back quickly, a blush on her cheeks. Anko's smirk grew as she decided to needle Kurenai for that comment. So you do like him? Huh, I knew it. Kurenai frowned at the childish antics of her friend and sighed. Maybe I do, but I am not going out with him after that little stunt you pulled. It should be 2 dates before seeing what my breasts actually look like. At minimum. Anko just chuckled and hip-bumped Kurenai. I'm sure, but it's not like he'd only go for you for your body. Snickering, Anko concluded her statement with, Daddy Hokage would make sure of it to keep a few pictures from becoming public. Kurenai looked at Anko with a raised eye, wondering why she didn't just sell those pictures to the Hokage to get money, but just mentally shrugged, long giving up on understanding her friend's mind. Anyways, what is this plan of yours? It better be a good one because we know how often they fail. Anko nodded her head, acknowledging that her plans didn't always follow through right. At least my plans usually turn out alright. Besides, this is different. Kurenai cut in quickly, silencing Anko. If it involves selling snake oil medicines again, using me as a test subject, then you can go right ahead. Different, Anko yelled, before getting back to a conversational tone, grinning at remembering all the creams she got to rub on Kurenai's body, even if no one was buying anything. A success in her book, all things considering. Look, you know how I am good at poker, right? I know you are good at poking me, Kurenai grumbled. Okay, that may be true, but I'm talking about the card game, Anko said. I used to be good at scamming lunch money out of the other kids back in the academy. Look, there's this high-stakes poker game every week down at that one barbecue place, the small one the Akamichi clan owns. Half the council attend and so does the Hokage. There's a minimum stake of 1,000,000 ryu. A million, Kurenai yelped, stopping in her tracks. Are you out of your mind? I don't have 1,000,000 ryu, and even if I did, I wouldn't risk it on your poker skills. Look, you've got 200,000 off that last mission, right? Anko said, plus the 250 you set aside for a rainy day. And I've got 550,000 I haven't managed to squander yet. That's 1,000,000, we go in, stake that. If it all goes wrong then I bet my coat, take the next pot for all I can while they're drooling and we quit. Give me one reason that I should go along with a crazy plan like that, Kurenai said. Preferably a reason that won't leave us in the bad books of the wives of all the clan heads once they find out. Anko raised one eyebrow and then moved closer to whisper into Kurenai's ear. The Chunin froze. After a moment, a trail of drool began to leak from the side of her mouth. Hey, Anko said smugly. Let's go get our stake out of the bank, Kurenai, she declaimed and set off, towing the still glassy-eyed Kurenai behind her. Several hours later, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy with 3 lines on both his cheeks would be seen running in a dirty, white shirt and shorts that were too large for him, held up by some rope and was frayed on the leg openings. This was a fairly common sight for this particular 6-year-old to be seen running from a mob of villages, especially on the poor kid's birthday, the military police, or a group of masked ninja known as Anbu. The mobs chased after him in hatred that the child did not understand, while the police and Anbu chased him for his pranks and was more understandable to the child. Today, the officers, in civilian attire, were chasing the brat known as Naruto Uzumaki for his latest prank. The officers did not want to know how much water the brat drank to get that many uniforms wet, and they especially did not want to know what he ate to get such a distinct smell. What the officers did want to know was what they'd get to do to the little prankster once they caught him. As luck would have it, the crowds in the market were dying down at this time, allowing for the officers to spot the kid as he was catching up to the two lady ninjas we listened in on earlier. There he is. What? There. Get him. I am going to kill that brat when we get our hands on him. The three civilian-garbed officers were not bothering with stealth, using rage to try and capture the blonde menace. Anything involving little Naruto always seemed to anger certain people. Eep! Naruto freaked and turned down the alleyway the two kunoichi had gone down not long before. Running as fast as his little legs could carry him, Naruto barely made it through the open door the two women entered before being grabbed. Where do you think you are going? The Anbu standing guard at the door said in an authoritative voice, missing the short kid that slipped by him. Look, we're chasing the... One officer started. Nope, private council meeting, the Anbu cut them off, not even looking up. We're with the military police. Protested a second member of the military police, made up of one clan, the Uchiha. Huh, so why no uniforms? Asked the Anbu. The three Uchiha exchanged glances. Their boss would not be happy if they advertised exactly how the brat had pranked them this time. Look. Denied. Fugaku Uchiha is in there, he's our clan head. We just need to tell him. Unless it's about an imminent invasion by at least 100 S-class nin, forget it. The Anbu said. Private meeting. If you were really with the military police, you'd know that. Now go away or I'll hand you over to Ibiki to find out why you really want to sneak into a private council meeting. The Anbu then closed the door on the faces of the three. The leader of the village turned in an attempt to examine the child in his robes, finding it rather difficult with the child constantly turning with him so that his backside was towards the little one so the child was behind the Hokage. The most powerful man in the village sighed, recognizing that this was Naruto trying to be stealthy and hide. Naruto, why are you here? The old man asked the child. Naruto stalled a bit, knowing the old man, the man he thought of as a grandfather, did not always appreciate the humor or justice in his pranks. That normally wouldn't hinder his talking about his pranks, except that there were a bunch of other old men that Naruto recognized, in his 6-year-old mind, as being meanies and sourpusses who never appreciated a good prank. Following you, Naruto answered cheerfully. Sarutobi sighed inwardly. It's a little late, Naruto. Shouldn't you go home before the caretakers at the orphanage start to worry about you? Naruto blinked. Oh, they never worry about me, old man. But what are you doing here? Yo, Hokage, called Anko from the table. Are you gonna talk to your mascot all day or can we start the game? It's a game. Naruto shouted in amazement. Old man, I never knew you could play games too. You always said you were too busy. Before anyone thought to stop him, he darted over to the table and stood on a chair to look at the table. It was a large dining table usually used for the restaurant customers who came in large parties, but bought by Choza Akamichi's grandfather specifically for the weekly poker games that had been running here for almost as long as Konoha had been a going concern. Legend had it that the first Hokage had lost the post of Hokage to his brother at the table only to win it back the same night and appoint his brother as his successor the next morning. Naruto stared at the long wooden surface, now covered with green cloth, and at the stacks of cards and poker chips heaped up in front of a large, wide man named Choza. Wow, what sort of game is it? It is a grown-up game, Naruto, the third Hokage answered from behind the boy. And there are very strict rules on who can play. Ah, but it looks like fun, Naruto pouted. What do I need to do to play? It's the money, brat, Anko answered in her normal, forward manner. You have to lay down 1 million ryu if you are going to play this game. She pointed towards Shuza, and the strongbox next to him, who was exchanging stacks of money for chips as people paid in to play. A million, Naruto exclaimed before taking a moment to think. Looking at the Hokage he asked, is that a lot? The Hokage smiled down at Naruto, having problems seeing how anyone could hate such a lovable, innocent child. Yes, it is. Maybe when you are older. Naruto pouted again and rummaged in his pocket, pulling out a bloated, worn wallet meant to look like a frog. Opening the wallet up and letting his money spill out. I got lots of money in Gamma, Naruto said happily, hugging his wallet. Is this enough? Kurenai went wide-eyed and nearly choked at seeing how much money the kid had on him. Sure, she could tell it wasn't a million, but how could a child have so much money with them? The Hokage frowned at the sight of the money and quickly ran his hand through it, counting it up and finding it to be about how much Naruto should have had from his allowance from the last few years. Did the kid not spend any of it? Choza chuckled suddenly. What the hell, fellows, he said, nodding to Shikaku, a man with 2 scars on the right side of his face and his dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and Inoichi, a blonde-haired, teal-eyed man. Why not let him play? You mean it? Naruto exclaimed. Really? Sure. Choza grinned, toothily. It's your money, so I guess you can do what you want with it. Just come over here with it and I'll count you out some chips to play with. He saw Hiyashi Hyuga, a man with white, featureless eyes, long black hair, and a stern face, nods slightly in understanding, and Fugaku Uchiha, a rather plain-looking, but serious black-hair-and-eyed man, smiled thinly as he caught on. He also saw the Hokage's eyes narrow and made a point of counting out Naruto's chips with more care than usual, giving the kid the 4th Hokage sealed a demon fox inside exact value for his money, and the Hokage no reason to complain. Naruto sat down to the left of the Hokage, which placed him next to Anko as well, Kurenai sitting a little away from the table to show that she was not playing herself while questioning why she got dragged into this, and the old man began to quickly explain the rules of the game to the little boy. The first few hands moved slowly with small pots as everyone waited for the last few to arrive and give Naruto time to get used to the rules without losing too many chips. The only surprise that happened was a crippled, bandaged old man with dark gray hair and a cross-shaped scar on his chin named Danzo coming in. Danzo wasn't a regular, but after a few skeptical looks at Naruto and Choza, Danzo took a seat and joined in on the game. The pots began to rise towards their usual level, 10,000 Ryu chips moving across the table. The play was fierce today and the Hokage had to look to his own cards, with only occasional attention to Naruto. No one had had any spectacular hands yet, nothing better than a pair or a 3 winning any hands. There was a moment's excitement when Hiyashi and Naruto spent almost a minute staring at each other, gauging their confidence in their hand. Hiyashi folded on his pair of 3s, which was a pity because Naruto was completely wrong about a 5, 7, 8, 10 and knave being worth anything when they were mixed hearts and spades. Hiyashi made a mental note not to rely on the brat's confidence in his cards when he didn't actually know what the cards were worth, and Naruto raked in the biggest pot so far. Even with a big win, Naruto didn't seem to be doing so well with what looked to be the same amount he started with. The Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, gave the boy a worried look. Naruto, are you sure you want to keep playing? After all, you just had a big win. No way. Naruto yelled happily, I want to win much bigger than that. Seeing the smiling faces of the other players, Naruto misinterpreted the meaning to being they were happy for him. Unknown to the others, Naruto had carelessly knocked some of his chips onto the floor in his lap. It wasn't really fair to blame it on him since he was about 2 feet shorter than the next shortest player, and even with sitting on the cushions provided for him, he had a hard time reaching and accidentally let chips fall. If all his chips were stacked properly, everyone would see he was actually up by a fair amount. Enough to be only a few grand short of the usual minimum stake. Anko, unfortunately, was not doing anywhere near as well. She was down by about half of her initial stakes and Kurenai was getting nervous and slightly twitchy. We need a big pot, then plan B and get out of here, Anko thought to herself as she looked at her hand for the next game. Using all her ninja skills at keeping a straight face, Anko managed to avoid grinning like a lunatic. 4, 5, 6, and 7 of diamond were all looking up at her with a 2 of spades. This had the potential to be the best hand yet. All Anko needed was a 3, 8, or another diamond, and this hand would surely be hers. Choza opened high, having been pushing the pots higher since Danzo arrived, with 2 further raises before the hand got to Anko. Raising again, Anko pushed a third of the remaining chips in. Most of the table was still in when it came time to discard and get a new card, with most of the players tossing away 1 or 2 cards. Anko tossed the 2 of spades away and bit her tongue lightly to keep from maniacal laughter when she saw she got a queen of diamonds, giving her a flush. It was never a good idea to laugh maniacally when your boss was 2 seats to your right and most of the powerful men and women in the village sitting around the table. Although, Anko was of the firm opinion laughing maniacally around children was just fine. Several players began to fold, narrowing the field down. Danzo took a look at his cards, having drawn 2 and raised Inoichi and a weaponsmith both called while the Hokage folded. Naruto, after a moment of squinting at his cards, raised. Kurenai grit her teeth as Anko pushed the rest of their chips in order to match the current bet. This had better be good, Anko. Kurenai mentally screamed at the girl while mentally asking herself again why she was friends with Anko. "It's so warm in here," Anko said, standing up to remove her coat, hanging it over her chair before sitting again, her upper body covered only in her form-fitting top that the careful eye would be able to see that Anko was not wearing a bra as the tip of her nipples were clearly hard. The temperature certainly seemed to be rising for the men in the room as several faces went noticeably red. "Hey, Naruto said happily to Anko, "isn't this fun?" "Oh yes," Kurenai replied tightly, "fun." At the end of this round of bets only 6 players remained in play. Choza looked at his cards again, looked at the others still in and folded, not feeling his hand was good enough. Danzo after a quick check of his cards raised again, a smirk on his lips at Anko. Inoichi folded, followed quickly by the weaponsmith. Naruto smiled sweetly at Kurenai as he pushed in the last of his chips on the table to the pot in order to call. All eyes went to Anko and the empty spot in front of her as Kurenai bit her lip in nerves. "Alright," Anko said in a carefree manner. "I'll throw in. Me and Kurenai as personal servants to the winner." Kurenai gulped and went pale at that. Danzo looked at the pair with a leer. "That is acceptable," he decided. "Uzumaki?" Sarutobi coughed to get attention. "I hardly. It is up to those who are still playing to agree on what is acceptable," Danzo chided the Hokage. The Hokage sighed and looked to Naruto. The boy eyed the 2 women with a puzzled expression. "I know," Naruto said. "Servant means they work for me, right?" Between their missions, the 3rd Hokage insisted, "Correct, Danzo?" "Oh, certainly," the old cripple agreed. Kurenai's fingers tightened on Anko's shoulder. "You better win," Kurenai whispered into Anko's ear. "Okay, so are we done betting?" Naruto asked. "I believe so," Danzo said. "I believe you should begin, Ms. Mitarashi. Surely the inclusion of you 2 must count as a form of a raise." Anko shrugged and smirked in a smug manner as she laid her cards out one at a time. "Flush of diamonds," she said confidentially. "Queen high." Danzo gave her a long smile that was definitely a leer and started laying down spade after spade. His 5th card was the king. "Flush of spades," he said. "King high." Kurenai's hands moved towards Anko's neck in a slow attempt to strangle her. Now, Ms. Yuhi," Danzo smirked. "No damaging the merchandise." Naruto turned to the Hokage. "Old man, how does a pair of 3s count against that?" "It doesn't beat it," Sarutobi said with a sigh. It saddened his heart to see a child be cleaned out like that. Especially one so close to his heart. "What if I had 2 pairs of 3? Naruto innocently asked, honestly not knowing. The entire room fell silent at that question as Naruto revealed his hand. A wild-haired woman with red markings under her eyes that was idly playing with her chips dropped the one in her hand. The sound of it hitting the ground broke the spell of silence Naruto's announcement created. 4 3s stared back at the assembled players and Danzo's hands began to visibly shake before he took a hold of himself. "Well, congratulations, young man," he said somewhat grudgingly. "It would seem that you have a pair of matched pet kunoichi." "Pets?" Anko yelled in anger. "I said nothing about being pets." "Servants was the term used," the Hokage agreed. "But without any other term specified, I suppose it will be for however long Naruto wants you." "Don't worry, new sister," Naruto reassured the trembling Kurenai. "I'll look after you." Anko shrugged, figuring that the brat wasn't the worst master she could have. The jiggle her breasts made caused nearly 24 eyes to focus on the slight bounce and sway. "Fine, whatever, we're his slaves. I'll get some chains and collars for us later." The Hokage collapsed onto the floor in surprise, his eyes glazing over at the mental image of his subordinates in such an outfit. "Anko, you will do no such thing," Kurenai yelped out, grabbing her fellow slave by the front of her chain-mail suit. Anko chose to fight back and the 2 bickering kunoichi rolled underneath the table with Naruto yelling out words of encouragement to both of his new big sisters in the catfight. The distraction for the men was great until Choza suggested a break from play to let tempers cool and to get drinks. With all the commotion, it was unsurprising that the Hokage missed seeing the Ino Shika-cho trio whispering amongst themselves. After the commotion settled down and the players were mostly back to sitting around the table again, Danzo decided to question Naruto's two kunoichi servants. "I trust that the two of you have settled your differences?" "Yeah," Anko drawled out, rolling her eyes while putting a handful of chips onto the table. "No slave gear, just appropriate dress for servants who expect to be seen in public." "Right, Kurenai?" Right," Kurenai said, eyeing the chips. "Anko, where did you get those chips?" "They were on the floor," Anko answered, giving her chest the attention of several eyes as she shrugged again. "Must have dropped them when I took my coat off." Naruto blinked and looked at Anko. "Oh, you dropped some too, new sister?" "I found all these under my chair," Naruto said, pointing to the stacks in front of him that caused a few choked exclamations as the others noticed that Naruto clearly had the largest pile at the table. "Wait," Inoichi interrupted, eyes still wide at seeing Naruto's stack. "Anko, you can't keep playing now." Anko stared at him, a look of disbelief on her face. "What the fuck are you talking, you old bastard? We ain't broke yet." Danzo cleared his throat. "Inoichi is correct. House rules say that only one member of any clan can play at a given time, to prevent abuse of authority. Obvious military ranks don't count for that, otherwise the Hokage could bet any of us, or Fugaku could use Sume." He was cut off by a bark from under the table and Sume had to restrain her canine companion, Kuromaru, from taking a chunk out of the aged and retired veteran for even suggesting the possibility. "But you are the dem." Choza started to finish for Danzo before catching the Hokage's glare and quickly edited his word choice. "Hey, now that you are the kid's toys, for you to play could give him an advantage since you're honor-bound to do whatever he tells you." "That is total bullshit," Anko yelled, standing up to slam her fist on the table. "You think?" Sarutobi coughed, interrupting Anko's rant. "Anko, please, they do have a point and those really are the house rules. Perhaps the two of you would like to take seats behind Naruto. And could you get him a glass of milk to drink while you calm down?" "Don't look at me like that, Naruto, you're too young for anything alcoholic." "Geez, never thought I'd be giving a brat milk," Anko muttered, getting up and heading to the kitchen to get her new master some milk. "Of course," Danzo said smoothly. "That raises the question of whether it would be possible for us to win back Kurenai and Anko's freedom." If his expression when he looked at Kurenai was supposed to be charming, then it failed, since Naruto was only one who didn't recognize it as a leer. He might have if he hadn't been wondering why the funny bandaged man thought that he'd bet away his new sisters. "Freedom?" Kurenai snorted. "I'm sure that that's what you were thinking of. Look all you want, but all you'll see is this," she finished, standing and heading for the kitchen to find out what was keeping Anko and the milk for Master Naruto. The Chunin made a point of rolling her hips as she walked, to remind Danzo of what he'd failed to get, a motion that all the men at the table watched with interest and, in a few cases, with frustration. "I think that Anko and Kurenai's situation, in regards to Naruto is, a personal one," the Hokage nervously said. "Perhaps more like a clan one," Hiyashi suggested, taking a sip from his cup of rice wine. "He is technically the head of the Uzumaki clan." Yes, that is reasonable," Sarutobi mumbled out. "Hey, Kurenai. You aren't mad, are you?" Anko asked with a nervous laugh. "Mad? Why would I be mad?" Kurenai asked dangerously. "You only sold us into slavery." "Yeah, well," Anko said with a shrug, "at least it is only with the brat. How much trouble can he be? He's 6 or something, not like that old fossil Danzo or Choza. He was definitely giving us the eye. Looked like he wanted to eat us up. And you know what they say about Akamichi." Kurenai snorted as she opened the milk and began to pour it into a glass she found. "Anko, that cannibalism rumor is just that, a rumor. But I suppose you are right. Besides the Hokage, the kid is probably the best one that could have won us. He seems like any other kid, other than his little resident." "Yeah," Anko said, rolling her eyes. "Like he's the only one with some damn seal on him? Let's just make sure that he doesn't lose. We could still wind up with one of the old goats if he does." "And I am sure you have a wonderful plan for that," Kurenai said in a very sarcastic tone. "Ignoring how well you're leap." "Anko." Kurenai yelped at feeling Anko grope her well-toned ass. Whirling around, Kurenai found herself pinned to the refrigerator, the slightly shorter girl pressing up against her. "Trust my feminine wiles," Anko said cheerfully, taking the glass from her friend's hand and taking it to the table for their new master. Once the kunoichi pair returned, Kurenai having wide eyes as if something shocked her more than the last hand Anko lost, the game resumed. Play was far more conservative after the last hand and Naruto lost a bit more than he won. Considering the small size of the bets, his pile of chips was not depleted by too much and was still far ahead of where he began the game. Some of the losses came from mistakes Naruto made, twice folding on what was likely to be winning hands. Then the Hokage noticed a slight nod from Choza as he checked his newly dealt hand. The Hokage doubted it was a coincidence that Inoichi, the man opening the betting, bet higher that Shikaku not only checked that bet, but raised the stakes higher. Naruto barely looked at his hand and pushed 1,000,000 ryo into the pot, betting rather recklessly. Choza hesitated, double-checking his hand. He hadn't been winning much that night, but steeled his nerves and pushed half his remaining chips into the pot to continue. Cards were discarded and dealt to those still in, and the Hokage felt a chill in his spine at seeing Naruto casually toss away 4 cards. Choza nearly choked on his tongue trying to avoid laughing at the thought of the boy raising despite having nothing in his hand. Choza smiled to himself at seeing a pair of kings in his hand next to the 3 jacks he had kept. This hand was surely in the bag for him. Inoichi and Shikaku raised again, more conservatively this time around, after spotting the smile and slight nod from Choza, and were glad for the agreement the 3 had. Kuroda, the weaponsmith, hesitated for a moment before pulling out and placing the deed for his shop into the pile on the table as security for the chips he didn't have. The Hokage folded, disappointed that he failed to get the flush or straight he was hoping might win him the hand. Everyone turned to look at Naruto as he stood up in his chair and leaned forward precariously, only Kurenai's quick action at grabbing the back of his shirt keeping the boy from falling face down onto the table. Naruto surprised everyone by pushing forward all his chips before sitting back down with a happy smile, proud of himself. "Careful Naruto, that is a big bet," the Hokage warned, only getting a grin in reply while the 2 kunoichis Naruto now owned looked at each other nervously. Choza paled at seeing that bet, unable to match it with the chips he had on the table. The odds of anyone beating a full house was a long shot. It was the best hand of the night other than Naruto's earlier 4 of a kind. But that wouldn't matter if he couldn't match the bet. Thinking quickly, Choza pulled out his wallet and took out a stack of deeds he had been going over earlier. All were for spots in the market for food stalls that the Akamichi rented out. All prime locations in the market. Choza had simply put them into his wallet instead of going home and putting them away and coming back for the poker game. "These should make up the difference," Choza offered, pushing in all his chips. The Hokage stood up and looked over the deeds before looking at each of the players. Inoichi and Shikaku simply folded while Kuroda gave a sharp, decisive nod that Naruto imitated. "Full house," Choza said with a mixture of relief and smugness. Inoichi and Shikaku smiled as well, happy to push the pot to such heights for their friend. Naruto grinned right back. "This beats that, right?" he said, laying down 2 queens and a joker followed shortly by a pair of 3s. There was a chuckle from Kuroda that quickly developed into a full belly laugh that was not at Naruto's expense. "Well played, youngster. That is indeed a winning hand all right. As is this," he said laying down his pair of 3s, a pair of queens, and the other joker. "Exactly equal hands," Fugaku whispered with a low whistle. "Never seen that happen." "The brat loses," Choza snapped irritably. "Look at the sweets, if the cards are the same value, then the suit decides." "Don't split hairs," Kuroda said with a dismissive wave. "Call it even." He began to split the pot, taking his deed back and half the chips while pushing the rest of the deeds and chips over to Naruto. The Hokage smiled, knowing Naruto won more than money and property this round. He won recognition as a fellow person and human. But the game could go on for a long time and the stakes just kept getting higher. Besides Choza, the sweet check is only done for flushes of equal value since flushes are the only hand that has only a single sweet, the Hokage told the saddened Akamichi. "Huh, what are these?" Naruto asked, looking at the pieces of rolled-up paper he had gotten the last round. "Title to property," Kurenai said, taking the deeds from Naruto to look through them. "Whoever owns these papers owns the building or land that they describe. So that means that as long as you have them, you own. Kurenai paused with a slight frown as she leafed through them. 17 spaces in Konoha Market. Whoever runs the stalls in those spaces has to pay you for permission to have their stall there. Naruto's eyes widened and a large smile formed on his lips. Wow, could I give one to old man Tucci? He's always saying he wished he could move Ichirakus to the market and sell ramen to the people there. He'd be so happy if he could do that. Kurenai shrugged. Maybe. It depends on the exact agreement that you have with the stalls that are there. Sort it out later, kid, Kuroda advised. We're here to play cards, not talk business. Hell, you might not even still have the stalls when the sun comes up, so why worry? Right, Naruto declared loudly. Deal me some cards then, he told Choza, who glared and passed the cards to the civilian to his left. I'm sitting this hand out, the big Jonin said, standing up. Got to go get some more money to keep playing with. Shikaku and Inoichi stood up as well, indicating they were in the same position and left the table with their teammate. The cards were dealt and Naruto held up his hand for examination, incidentally letting Kurenai and Anko get a look at what he had. As trained Kunoichi, the pair were too good at masking their emotions to let their disappointment at Naruto having nothing in his hand cross their faces. Sarutobi coughed as the betting reached him. I don't think I want to run out of drink money, he said, eyeing his own modest heap of chips. So how much would you say that permission for a child to enter the academy a year early was worth? Fugaku eyed him warily. I thought you didn't want any more prodigies appearing like Itachi did? He asked carefully. So he can go as screwy as Maida or that Hitaki kid. Sume snorted. The fourth didn't approve of children as young as 3 or 4 being entered, Sarutobi said in a firm voice. After seeing the effects on one of his own students. Well, I agree with him, but I will stretch the point by a year. That is, if anyone wins this slip off of me, he said, jotting down a promise to that effect on a slip of paper. Write another and put both into the pot for your call, Kuroda suggested. I think there are quite a few kids out there who could benefit from starting a little early. Not all of us give out kanai as toys, Sume grunted, but made no further protest as the 2 slips were pushed forwards and into the pot. Naruto absently put his own chips in without raising and discarded 2 cards at random. He didn't get anything worthwhile though and folded rather than keep betting. Sume ended up winning and looked at the papers irritably. What the hell am I supposed to do with these? She muttered, having no intentions of letting her son enter early. You could give them to me, Naruto chirped cheerfully. Hell no, kid, Sume snorted. You want them, you gotta win them. Anko gave the kid a worried look as Inoichi and Shikaku came back to the table. If his luck was running out, then she'd be back in hot water. Not that she'd never been there before, and taking Kurenai with her, a much bigger concern. Somehow, she doubted the kid would stop wagering just because he wasn't doing so well. We've put up some property up against an advance from the bank, Inoichi announced, stacking chips in front of himself. We'll buy them back with the chips before we cash up whatever is left, alright? Chow's put our names and the value in chips down. No problem, Kuroda shrugged and getting up. I'll go bank this then, he said, holding up his shop's deed. I think I better get out of this game, the Hokage admitted, picking up his chips. The luck is just against me tonight. I'll mind the bank for Choza so he can concentrate on his game. As the Hokage walked past them, Kurenai moved aside to give him space, brushing up against Anko, who moved in closer and began to whisper a plan to keep Naruto from running through all his chips if he went onto a losing streak. Then she saw the fascinated gaze of some of the male players and instead simply whispered, "Play along with this," before beginning to nuzzle Kurenai's ear. Anko, Kurenai tried to protest, her yelp turning into a soft moan. Are you okay? Naruto asked, half turning. We're fine, Kurenai said, a soft moan in her voice, snaking an arm around Anko's waist to pull her in close to play along with the plan. You enjoy the ga-aim. Right, Naruto said with a grin as he plumped himself onto his cushions. I'm going to win everything. Normally, that statement would have elicited derision from the other players, but most of the men were too busy, fixing their pants, to comment. Needless to say, they were having difficulty focusing on the game in the next hand, where Sume bet one of the slips, went to the Hokage's former teammate Kaharu, who looked at it, shook her head and dropped it into her winnings so far, seeing no need for it. I'm going to win the next one. Naruto declared confidently and beckoned for Shuza to deal. The deal was sloppy, probably due to Anko nuzzling at the corner of Kurenai's jaw. Insume laughed out loud when Danzo dropped his cards face up and clutched at his nose, which was bleeding profusely, his eyes glazing slightly. The old crippled ninja stalked out of the room, not even bothering to pick up the handful of chips remaining to him. Sume bet the other permission slip and watched as Naruto managed to win the hand with a pair of tens. "I would advise against using that," Sume said in a reserved tone as Naruto clutched the slip of paper. "Kids who start early tend to go a bit crazy. I would never allow any of mine start at the academy before they were 8. "I'm already a bit crazy," Naruto retorted. "One of those masked people, Anbi?" "Anbu," Anko corrected before placing a hand onto Kurenai's chest, the other on her ass, and her teeth on her jaw, right below Kurenai's ear. "Right, Anbu," Naruto said with a smile and nod. "One of them told me I was a crazy last time they found me putting glue on the doorsteps of the police building." "That was you," Fugaku said with a growl as he tore his eyes from Anko and Kurenai. "What was that in aid of?" Naruto picked his nose contemplatively, feeling a rather large bugger sticking there. "Well, the police always chase me when I prank someone, so I thought that if their feet were glued to the ground then they wouldn't be able to." Kurenai whimpered slightly as Anko's hand began to slit up the inside of her skirt. Homura, sitting next to Kaharu, fell backwards out of his chair into perverted bliss. "Would you mind stopping that?" Kaharu asked the pair, getting slightly irritable. "It's not that I mind you taking advantage of this bunch of perverted men, but some of them aren't young enough to keep up anymore." "Huh, what do you mean, old lady?" Naruto asked. "Are my new sisters doing something naughty?" Sume started snickering out loud, earning glares from most of the men at the table. "Ya no, brat, you are okay," she said with a smirk. "Damned if I know how, but looks like you're turning out okay despite everything. Still, maybe you'd better take those girls of yours in hand." Naruto looked confused. "What do you mean?" he asked, curious. "Well, you could sit on one of them," she suggested with a grin that was almost, but not quite, feral. "That'll split them up and make them concentrate on not causing you trouble." "I got to keep them out of trouble?" Naruto asked with a frown. "I can't even keep me out of trouble." "Not that you try very hard," Anko muttered. The smallest one at the game turned around to her and pouted. "If I'm going to be in trouble, it might as well be for something I did," he pointed out. "Sit here, sissy. I gots to be responsible and keep you out of trouble." The look on Anko's face was priceless, with only Naruto and a civilian that would die in a few months due to an unfortunate accident where he fell off a ladder taking down a wall scroll he was going to replace with one his wife liked better, not savoring the look for years to come, and the Hokage regretting for the rest of his life that he missed such a priceless moment as Anko obeyed and let Kurenai lift the little kid into her lap. Judging by the way Sume fell out her chair laughing, it would be a memory used for many times to brighten her days in the future. The look on Kuromaru's face when he jumped up, putting his front paws on the table and looked over them at Naruto was almost as amusing. The Inuzuka dogs were certainly intelligent, but they just didn't think like humans do. In this case, the large hound certainly found something amusing in the sight of Naruto being tended by 2 women twice his size and more than 3 times his age. Most likely the idea of a pup being the alpha of a group of bitches more capable of being alphas. Naruto then bounced the back of his head off of Anko's chest and deemed her to be more comfortable than the headrest of the chair. Due to the flirtatious playing Anko was previously doing with Kurenai left her a fair bit more sensitive than before. Her expression at the impact was far from the smug look she usually had. The next few hands were rather quiet and conservative, with no one else dropping out of the game. There was an electricity to the game, and it was clear that sooner or later the stakes would be rising rather high. Several players went over to the Hokage and gave him IOUs for more chips, only Aburame Shibi resisting the temptation when he went bust. The hand after Shibi left went down to Kaharu and Fugaku, with the former proving to have placed too much faith in 2 pairs when Fugaku played 3 queens, taking most of her remaining chips and the permission slip. It seemed likely for his son, Sasuke, to be starting the academy a year earlier than anticipated, as Fugaku carefully, or as carefully as his blood alcohol level allowed, folded up the slip and put it into his wallet. One of the civilians, the one who was going to have an unfortunate and easily avoided accident in a few months, looked at his cards before raising the stakes. It was such an awful bluff that the shinobi were almost embarrassed to take advantage of it. Kuroda and Naruto were the only ones to fold straight away and therefore the only ones not to get burned when the merchant demonstrated that he'd been dealt a straight flush and hadn't been bluffing at all, ranking in enough for his soon-to-come funeral and for his family to rebuild their lives after he passes away. You were lucky once, but will you be lucky again? Choza muttered, not happy about the way this game was going. Usually at least one of the Ino Shika Cho trio came out ahead in these games, often enough that the one winning would be able to give the other two their stakes back and still be ahead. Instead, they were all losing, badly. Dealing the cards out, Choza motioned for the merchant to start the betting this time. He opened high and player after player decided not to risk another big loss betting against him. Hiyashi raised the stakes however, rather more than anyone had expected given how conservatively the Hyuga clan leader had been playing all night. Hiyashi, are you feeling alright? Fugaku asked with a healthy dose of snark, showing he really didn't care for the Hyuga. That is more than you bet in every hand so far tonight. I've got a good feeling about this hand, Hiyashi said, staring at Yasuki rather blearily. Inoichi frowned and leaned over to count up the empty bottles on the floor next to Hiyashi. There were 3, with another on the table, and the rice wine Hiyashi enjoyed was rather potent. I'm feeling good too, Naruto declared with a beaming smile on his turn, raising the stakes even higher, causing Kurenai to gulp nervously. Yeah, Anko yelled. Show him how it is done, Master Naruto. You are going to be rich, rich, rich. She was feeling very good and was trying to really get into supporting her new master. By the time that play reached the merchant again, he was looking nervous. Only Hiyashi and Naruto were still in the game, and both looked very determined and Naruto had already been awfully lucky so far tonight. He shook his head and threw his cards down face up to display a pair of knaves. Too rich for me, he said with a sigh. Hiyashi turned his stare to Naruto. Let us be men about this, Mr. Uzumaki, he said formally, if a little unsteadily. How much do I have to bet for you to put everything you have on the table? Hiyashi, the Hokage said warningly, you don't have as many chips as Naruto, so he has no reason to do that. Fine then, Hiyashi said, pushing forward all his chips. I'll bet you all this in. He said, waving a finger dramatically towards Naruto as he paused, getting the other players to lean in a little at what he was going to bet. And 2 Hyuga maidens to balance out the 2 commoners you got earlier. There was a stunned silence with only Anko being able to notice the commoner comment. While technically true, she still took offense at it for both her and Kurenai's sake. Before anyone could stop him, Naruto pushed all his chips forwards as well. I'm not betting away my new sisters, he said firmly in a way that was absolutely adorable to the women at the game. Anko hugged him lightly in relief, smiling at someone wanting her. But if you want all this bet, then I am game. Right then, Hiyashi declared, slapping down his cards, 2 kings. After a short pause, he fell forwards onto the table. Dang, Inoichi said out loud with a bit of a laugh. He put away quite a few of those bottles. I'd hate to be him in the morning. I wouldn't want to be him either, the Hokage said. That isn't 2 kings. That isn't even 2 of a kind. He has 1 king and the rest of his hand is nothing. He must have been seeing doubles. Naruto, if you have anything at all, then you've beaten him. Naruto shrugged and laid down his cards. 3 of spades, 5 of hearts, 7 of diamonds, 9 of clubs, and the ace of spades. There was a single, solitary whistle from the Shiranui clan head, who simply stood and walked away to cash in the chips remaining to him. He'd lost enough already and he'd have a tale to tell his son Genma in the morning about the kid who'd bet a fortune with nothing at all in his hands. Fugaku reached over and picked up the half-empty bottle next to Hiyashi's place and poured a measure of the wine before taking a sip to get over the shocks of the last hand. Good stuff, he noted, contemplating getting some himself for a special occasion. He better have his hangover wear off before he gets home. The Hyuga elders are shrill at the best of times. They are going to be in a shrieking fury unless Hiyashi can win back that promise of 2 Hyuga maidens. Somehow, he didn't sound all that sympathetic towards the only clan that rivaled the power of Fugaku's clan. Pass the bottle around, Kuroda told him. The Uchiha passed the bottle and each person filled their cup with a measure of the sake, except Naruto, Anko filling up a cup a little before passing it on so Naruto wouldn't have any yet. 2 of the civilians picked Hiyashi up by shoulders and carried him away from the table. If you can wake him, there's coffee in the kitchen, Choza said, not looking up. and get some water down his throat. I'd not wish facing those whining old women hung over on the Kyuubi. Choza got away with saying that for two simple reasons. 1. It was clear he meant the actual beast. 2. He did not even direct any attention towards Naruto. Are they really that bad? Naruto asked curiously, having heard a few tales of the Kyuubi and the fourth Hokage. Everyone around the table nodded and Naruto took on a contemplative look. So, next time a giant monster shows up, we should give it a hangover and send the old Hyugis at it. There were several snickers and the Hokage smiled again, noticing how no one in the room seemed to see Naruto as the demon anymore. Instead, all hatred for him was due to his good fortune in the game and maybe a few of his pranks. And the Hokage figured that they would stop hating his pranks when pulled on others, seeing them for what they were. Childish antics. Shikaku took the next several hands, despite Sume and Inoichi having decent hands. Then Naruto won another hand, but Shikaku took the next 3 hands. Looks like you're on a roll, Inoichi said, cracking open another bottle of wine. However, the Nara folded quickly on the next hand and the other players followed, leaving only Naruto and Sume staring at each other over their cards. I'll raise you. Sume began and then paused as Kuromaru bounded half up onto the table and started to yip at her. You sure? She asked the ninja dog and heads turned around the table. What was going on? Had Kuromaru spotted someone cheating or something? But another bark from the dog cut Sume off. Are you sure, Kuromaru? More barking. You have a feeling? She looked up and gave Naruto a searching look. Well, brat, Kuromaru seems to think you'd give it a good home if you've got the cards to take this hand, so. I'll raise your bet by the pick of the last litter from Kuromaru's mate. Several jaws dropped. In some ways it was easier to believe that Hiyashi would bet away members of his clan than that the Inuzuka would part with one of their precious dogs. Of course, if you don't look after the pup, Sume added, I'll cut you up and feed you to Kuromaru. Are we clear? Naruto blinked. I guess so. So, are we going to look at cards now? He asked, getting a nod before he turned over his cards, displaying 3 threes and a joker, setting aside the single knave in his hands. That's 4 of a kind, right, sissy? Damn right, Anko agreed with a grin, starting to like being called sissy by the brat. If asked, she would later deny it and say she only let him because by the time her good cheer from all his winning left her, he was already in the habit and it would be too big a pain to stop him. She would then threaten anyone else who thought they could call her that. What you got, Sume? The Jonin groaned and threw her cards down. Full house, she said with a huff. Queens over 2s. Fuck this for a game of ninja. I'm gonna quit for the night. Come by sometime, brat, and we can pick you out a puppy. Standing, she walked over to the kitchen and a few minutes later, as Inoichi was busy losing another hand based off overconfidence in a pair of 5s, the sound of someone's head being dunked in a bucket of water could be heard. Damn it, Inuzuka! Shouted Hiyashi from the kitchen and chuckles went around the room. I think Mr. Hyuga has awoken, the Hokage observed mildly. There was a muffled groan and more splashing. And Sume just told him what he lost on the last hand. How can you tell, old man? Naruto asked curiously, raking in the handful of chips in the pot. He just tried to drown himself the bucket of water, Naruto, the Hokage explained. Naruto shook his head. You can't tell that from here, he said confidently. I'm going to go see for myself. He hopped down from Anko's lap and grabbed Kurenai's hand. Come on sis. You play for me, he threw back over his shoulder at Anko who had a somewhat manic look in her eyes as she looked at the mountain of chips that was at her disposal. A minute later, Naruto's voice could be heard in the kitchen. How can he breathe when his face is covered in water like that? He can't, Kurenai replied. There was a slight cheer from the table that had nothing to do with her words and everything to do with Anko losing another hand. Shouldn't we do something? He is a grown man, Sume said without a care. If he wants to kill himself, it is up to him. There was a loud clatter, a splash and then the sound of Hiyashi cursing as Naruto intervened to save the man's life. Huh, now you don't just owe me 2 maidens. Naruto said loudly. You owe me your life as well. A pause took place as Hiyashi groaned, not liking his fate one bit. What is a maiden anyway? Naruto was looking a little sleepy, Sarutobi noted, as he and Hiyashi left the kitchen after getting an explanation on what a maiden was, and indeed, yawned loudly as he retook his seat on Anko's lap. The kunoichi looked nervous, but it apparently didn't occur to the boy to see how well, or in this case, how poorly, Anko played on his behalf. It was a decent amount, but Naruto was still way up. Perhaps you should call it a night if you are tired, Naruto, Sarutobi suggested. You've done very well after all. Ah, come on, Choza said casually, wanting one more chance at the veritable mountain of chips in front of Naruto. Hiyashi is just back in the game. You got to give him a chance to win everything he lost. What does he have left to bet? Sume snorted. He bet everything on his last hand, remember? Not quite everything, Hiyashi said, scribbling a note and passing it to the Hokage. Fair enough? Sarutobi carefully read the note and nodded, pulling out several stacks of chips and handing it over after placing the note into the strongbox. Don't spend it all in one place, Hokage said, giving Hiyashi a disapproving look, thinking of how unusually high the stakes have been getting this night. Usually it was only money that was bet, but after Anko bet herself and Kurenai, the bets kept getting bigger and other stuff was bet as well. I'll just play one more hand, old man, Naruto said with a nod. I gotta give them a chance, but only one. The Hokage shrugged and watched impassively as Choza dealt the cards out. To a trained observer it was clear that quite a few players saw promise in their hands. Fugaku was first to bet, pushing out a hefty number of chips with the trademark Uchiha smirk on his face. Evidently there was going to be a lot of action on this hand. Round the table the betting went out, nobody folding and most players raising. Given the number of chips that most had left, the pile in the center soon had more chips than anyone except Naruto. Choza dealt out more cards to those who wanted them and several of the more sober players shivered as Naruto actually discarded a pair of nines. Discarded a pair. Fugaku raised the stakes and was followed by the merchant to his left. Shikaku shook his head and dropped his hand. Hiyashi put in even more of his chips and the game went around again. It was clear that there weren't enough chips for everyone to stay in the game, and the numbers weren't low enough to call a halt. Inoichi eyed his hand. I'll throw in my Icha collection, he offered, seeing that he didn't have enough chips to keep up. All the special collector's editions in full color. You must have quite a hand, Kuroda muttered. Okay then, that's good with me. He examined his own cards and then counted his chips. I think I'll keep a few chips back for the next time around, he said. I'll throw in a full field kit of my best kunai, shuriken and senbon though, is that good with you lot? There were nods around the table and he pushed forwards as many chips as Inoichi had, along with a note confirming the promise of weapons. Naruto was grinning broadly as he pushed forwards enough chips to stay in, although he didn't raise, which caught the attention of the other players. Naruto had been raising more often than not, so perhaps he wasn't feeling as confident now for some reason? Make sure that Naruto doesn't cut himself playing with kunai if he wins them, the Hokage said quietly to Kurenai. I'm more worried about Anko playing with them, Kurenai replied under her breath, feeling that she could keep Naruto from hurting himself, but not as sure about what Anko might do with a full field kit of excellent quality weapons. As the betting continued, Fugaku drained the cup of wine by him before he started the next round of betting. Since we're all being so creative with our bets, he said thickly with a bit of a slur. I'll wager my heir Sasuke and Itachi. I thought that Itachi was the oldest one, a merchant said. Isn't he the heir? Maybe Itachi is actually a girl, Kuroda said. I always thought he was a bit too much of a pretty boy. Wouldn't that make him, her a trap? Anko said slyly with a smirk. Maybe Naruto is going to win another maid. Nah, a trap is the other way, Sume told the younger Kunoichi with a giggle. Like, if you were secretly a man. Itachi would be a reverse trap. Fugaku pounded his fist on the table. They're me boys, he said loudly. Boys. Both of 'em, boys. In the classic Hal Sench, Hiyashi declared, speaking a bit slower to get the words out with a slur. You can't bet your sons. 'Cause they are not property like your wife and daughters. Oh, that is so, getting back to your wives. Sume snorted as she watched the men at the table nod solemnly. Kurenai, Anko and the handful of other players who were of the fairer and deadlier were also taking note. Naruto snuggled back against Anko's chest. Sissy? Why are girls property and boys aren't? I never heard anything about that. It's a bunch of chauvinistic rubbish, Kurenai said. They figure that they're big macho men and that women can't get along without them, but it's them who can't cook or clean for themselves. You all say that, Hiyashi declared, But how many Hokages were women, eh? Got you there, haven't I, lady? That's dumb, Naruto declared. My new sisters are much better than this chauvinist guy. They can kick his butt. Ah, Kurenai said, and knelt to hug him, pressing Naruto's head between Anko and hers chests. Sarutobi felt a sudden urge to sit down, and perhaps to take a cold shower. A freezing cold shower. Lucky little bastard, more than one man thought as they saw Naruto be put into a joyous position. Fine, Fugaku declared, if I can't bet my sons, I'll bet my wife. Is that okay with you, Hiyashi? Oi, Fugaku, you really don't want to do that. Sume began to warn with a snort. I bloody well do, Fugaku said angrily, cutting off Tsune's warning. A pity that since the reminder that his wife, Makoto, was one of the best sword masters in the village and would be able to easily castrate Fugaku with a single cut would have inspired some caution in him. He didn't bother to check his cards, certain Sume was just taking the brat's side and shake his confidence. In fact, I'll raise the stakes higher. I'll bet command and control of the military police. Choza fell out of his chair in shock. Command? Control? As in one of us would be able to do what we want with it? He asked as he struggled back to his feet. Fugaku simply nodded. With shaking hands, Choza pushed the chips Fugaku had also wagered back. Betting Makoto and the military police is enough. If you added chips, no one else could hope to match. There were nods around the table from everyone, with Naruto trying to hide his mischievous grin at what pranks he could pull with the entirety or the military police to help him. The players around the table, with the exception of Naruto, began to count up their chips to see if they could stay in. Wow, Naruto softly exclaimed. I've got to win that. Anko smiled softly, hoping that Naruto got something good for the pair he tossed away. She was almost as excited by what could be done with the military police. I don't have enough chips, Hiyashi announced with a frown before looking around the table. I'll bet something else. A smile formed on his lips when he saw Naruto. Mr. Uzuzumaki, he said with a smile, Naruto taking a moment to realize Hiyashi meant him. If you promise me you will bet the promise of 2 Hyuga maidens, a promise between men, I'll bet. The Hyuga mansion. Naruto nodded, okay. It's a promise. Fine, someone get me a piece of paper, Hiyashi demanded. Sume complied and watched as Hiyashi wrestled with ink and brush before signing a document that bore little resemblance to the Hyuga's usual careful penmanship. He pushed the chips and the title to the Hyuga mansion over into the middle of the table. 2 merchants dropped out, unable to think of anything else to wager. A third offered a package holiday to the beaches of Southern Fire Country, travel, accommodation and food all included, to the winner and his family. Inoichi eyed his cards carefully. He felt good that he could win, but he didn't have much to bet with. He could bet his daughter. His little princess. No, he wasn't going to do that. She was too precious. There was no way he would anger her wife by even betting her. She'd do horrible things to him even if he won. Family jutsus were a no-go as well. Sighing, Inoichi decided to bet the only thing left. I'll bet the development and organization of a full mental landscape to the winner, flinching slightly, knowing this would be painful, tedious, and make any who go through with it have increased memory, focus, chakra reserves and control, and make it harder for Genjutsu and his family's techniques to be useful on the person. Knowing that was still not enough and that he'd have to add more, he added, and 4 people of their choice. The bet would be worth it. Control of the military police would make his clan stronger. All the money in the middle would also easily make up for the Inoshika-cho losses that night. The players looked over to Kuroda. He muttered to himself. He would never bet his little Tenten. At least, he wouldn't bet her to be a servant. Hand in marriage was a different story, but he doubted anyone would be interested. Naruto was probably the only one that would accept it, not understanding what marriage was. 3 custom-made weapons. Best quality I can produce, chakra channeling metal, specialized abilities, the full works, Kuroda said, with a nod. A low whistle came from a few of the players and Anko. Kuroda was one of the best weaponsmiths there was. The highest-end weapons he could make were almost a match for the legendary 7 swordsman's blades. Only reason they weren't as well known was that very few could even afford to buy one, and those that did get bought and used were usually designed for stealth and assassination missions. Some of the highest-paying missions, not straight combat like the 7 swordsman's blades, Thus they were less seen and more unknown. And here he was offering 3 of them. How much have you two drunk? Sume asked. Knowing the value of such bets nearly exceeded the value of the other bets. Lots and lots, the weaponsmith declared proudly. We can hold our liquor, can't we, Inoshi? Inoshi? Yamanaka Inoichi was face down on the table, ponytail bobbing as he snored. Are his cards face up or face down? Choza asked carefully. Face up would mean that Inoichi had dropped out of the game. And after his last bet that would be inadvisable to say the least. He at least needed a chance to not help make that many mindscapes. Face down, Kuroda reported after examining the other man's cards for a moment. That's all right then, Shuza said. We can wake him in a minute. Well, brat, it's your turn to bet. Naruto nodded. I'm betting the 2 maidens like I promised, he said. Choza's face turned red as he realized that accepting the girls as bets meant Naruto didn't have to bet any more chips. Especially since no one commented on their value when Hyuga brought it up. Choza simply sighed. Fine then, he said solemnly, I'll bet all this then. He pushed all his remaining chips forwards. I don't think that that's quite enough, Anko pointed out, looking at the number of chips. Come on, with all the bets being made, you don't really think that Inoichi making mental scapes for you and your family is only worth that pittance? I'll throw in a feast, prepared by my entire clan, for the winner and his family, Shuza said without hesitation. We'll make whatever they want. All you can eat. Deal. Anko and Naruto said immediately and as one, thinking of different foods with a grin. The last merchant pushed his chips forwards and a promise for a complete outfit for the entire household of the winner. Fugaku nodded. I don't think we'll be wanting any more betting after all that, he said with a smug expression on his face. So, let's see who has the best cards, shall we? Hiyashi had a superior look as he laid down his cards. All diamonds, the highest a 9. A flush, he said confidently. What are the odds, eh? Pretty good, Choza said, laying down his own flush, this one of clubs and queen high. Don't worry Hiyashi, I'll let you buy back your mansion when you have the cash. Inoichi disagreed with a shake of his head. Yeah, Choza said. I have a house already. Nope, Inoichi said in a chipper manner as he laid out his cards one by one. I got a flush as well. Queen high with my second being her son, a jack. Choza groaned. After his queen, the best he has was a 7. You already have a house as well. Why would you want Hiyashi's? Lil, Ino wants a dollhouse for her birthday, Inoichi said with a smile. I'm going to give her the whole Hyuga mansion with 2 Hyuga maidens as dollies. Hiyashi left the conversation by beginning to bang his head on the table in frustration. I'm a dead man, he muttered. Dead, dead, dead. And when I'm dead, Hizashi is going to kill me all over again. Stop shaking the table, Skikaku said in a bored voice. We'll talk with Inoichi once he sobers up. You won't need to, Fugaku said with a smirk. You see, I got a queen and a jack as well. That isn't worth much on its own, Kuroda said, discarding his hand, unable to beat anything on the table and counting up his chips. Sighing in relief that he could buy back his shop from the bank, and that in terms of money, he wasn't too horribly off. How about the queen's sister, flanked by the jack's twin brothers? The Uchiha head asked, revealing his cards to show he did indeed have a full house, jacks over queens. Sorry, Hiyashi, he added in a very insincere voice. I'd let you buy your mansion back, but we've been looking for some land to build a new prison complex on, and the Hyuga mansion should be just about large enough. Plus, with those 2 Hyuga maidens I just won, we won't have to pay for the cleaners. There was snicker from Anko, followed by high-pitched giggling as she looked Fugaku. You sure about that? She asked between giggles. Really sure? What do you have, Naruto? Kurenai asked, trying to move around to see what her friend had seen in their owner's hand. Naruto shrugged and put his cards down. I forget, he said. Is this better? They were a joker, ace of hearts, ace of clubs, ace of diamonds, and the ace of spades. A 5 of a kind. Specifically 5 aces, the best hand in the game, able to beat even the well-known royal flush. Hiyashi started to cry as Fugaku's face went purple, a heavy presence forming as he unleashed his killing intent. You little bastard, he snapped, scaring Naruto as he rose from his seat. Naruto turned around and buried his head into Anko's comforting chest embrace. You cheated, you must have. Sarutobi coughed meaningfully, from behind the Uchiha, where no one saw him before, cutting off Fugaku's rant. "Fugaku Uchiha," he said smoothly, evenly, a shiver ran down Fugaku's back. "I am sure that you are not suggesting that a 6-year-old could cheat without being spotted by any of the accomplished ninja at this table. Besides," he added, putting a hand on the Uchiha's shoulder, the killing intent dropping quickly. "I believe you have more pressing concerns, considering the nature of your losses." Fugaku's face lost all color as he fell back into his chair. "Hey, kid, what are you going to do with Hiyoshi's mansion?" Sume asked in an amused voice, having found all the suggestions entertaining. The boy gave her a puzzled look. "I'm gonna live in it, of course," he told her, not sure why she'd think something else. "I don't have to stay in the orphanage now, I've got a house of my own." He looked at the crying Hiyoshi and then hopped down from Anko's lap and trotted around the table to him. "Don't worry, mister, I won't make you leave unless you're naughty." Sarutobi left Choza, who was moving as if in deep shock, to start opening up the bank to cash the players out and walked over to the sleepy, yet victorious, Naruto. "You did very well, Naruto," he said, patting the boy on his head. "Why don't you go sit with your new sisters while we get packed up?" Naruto yawned and wandered back around the table. Before he was halfway around, Kurenai intercepted him and scooped him up in a hug. "Well done, Master Naruto." The boy received several jealous looks from the men at the table as he yawned again and rested his head sleepily against Kurenai's bosom. Choza heaped the piles of deeds and Ryo up on the table and then looked down at the bare table where his chips had been. With a sigh he pulled out half a dozen deeds out of the heap and set them aside. "Right, first things first. Who wants to buy back their deeds first? Hiyoshi, you put the hot springs up for 500,000 Ryo. Oh," he realized, looking at the paltry chips remaining in front of Hiyoshi. Tears continued to run down Hiyoshi's face as he simply pushed over his remaining chips, accepting their value in cash. After counting it carefully he walked over to the bar. "I guess there's enough to get me drunk," he muttered. "With any luck, drunk enough to forget all about tonight." Panic began to spread amongst the remaining players as they checked their chips against what it would cost to reclaim their property. Almost all of them were coming up short. Choza was in the worst position, as he tallied up the stacks of that were in the bank and tried to measure that against the small mountain of chips in front of Naruto. He was terribly tempted to just go over to the bar and join Hiyoshi. Except that he probably couldn't afford to pay for a bender. Hell, he didn't have enough cash left to pay for a small shandy. "Hokage," he said unsteadily, waiting for Sarutobi to come back. When the Hokage had arrived, Choza whispered, "Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki has broken the bank. There isn't enough money to redeem all of his chips." "Well, I suppose that he'll have to take some of the property then," the Hokage decided. "Would anyone who can afford to redeem their property come over first?" he said out loud. "Those who can't will have to work something out with Naruto." He looked at the stack of deeds and then at the chips in front of the yawning Naruto. "Tomorrow, perhaps? Choza, cash Naruto out 1,000,000 Ryo for now. He shouldn't need any of it by the time we have the meeting. Anko, give him the chips. Then you and Kurenai can take him home for some sleep. Kurenai, your apartment is near here, isn't it?" He got a nod and smiled softly. "I will start sorting this out. We can meet at the Hyuga mansion tomorrow at, let's say, noon to sort things out. I'll also look after Naruto's remaining chips for you and personally count them up." "Fine," Choza muttered. He watched sullenly as Anko tucked a sheaf of banknotes into Naruto's frog wallet and then added the various IOUs for all the assets that had been lost to the blonde brat. "This is gonna be a nightmare," he groaned, envisaging the likely reaction of his family at losing their control of the stall spaces and possibly half a dozen restaurants to boot, depending on how much cash he could scrape together to buy them out of the bank. "You see, Kurenai?" Anko asked as the trio walked out of the restaurant, Naruto sleeping peacefully in Kurenai's arms as the sun rose ahead of them. "I told you that it would all work out in the end. And look, we're gonna be living in a mansion." Kurenai sighed, a small grin on her lips that she did her best to hide from Anko. "I suppose so, but you still sold us into slavery." Finally, the Hokage said with a yawn as he wrote down the total winnings Naruto had accumulated in chips. "We really need to stop these reckless bets. It only causes me pains in the head and ass." Sarutobi stood up from behind his desk and stretched, moaning in slight pain as he felt the hours of sitting in his chair, counting chips, catching up with him. Looking out of the window in his office, the old man, god of shinobi. Hiruzen Sarutobi saw that the sun was up and shining, but he still had a few hours till the meeting at the still current Hyuga mansion. Turning around and popping his head out of his office, he saw his secretary sitting there at her desk. Mind getting me a strong cup of tea and canceling any appointments I have today? I have a meeting at noon at the Hyuga mansion to deal with the fallout of last night's game. Yes sir, the secretary said with a nod, writing down the note to cancel the appointments, luckily very few with it being the middle of the week and the day after a poker game. The staff always learns quickly to keep the day after the poker games light to make scheduled changes easier. Sume and her canine companion were nervously having breakfast with Kiba, Hana, and the Haimaru brothers, Hana's ninja dog companions. Kiba was oblivious to the tension, happily eating away, but Hana was staring at her mother, knowing something was wrong, while her companions stared down Kuromaru. "Mom, what did you lose?" Hana said in a firm voice, not liking the nervousness her mother, the alpha of the clan, was showing this morning, and knowing where she was last night. "Well, Sume began, sounding less confident than she meant to. "I only lost a bit of money. Not that much, really." Hana just stared at her mom. Kiba, having paid attention to the conversation, looked at his mom as well. Not liking the way she was being looked at, Sume sighed and continued. "Kuromaru, however, convinced me to wager one of the pups his mate will be having soon." Hana blinked at that response and shrugged. She knew full well what that meant, but it wasn't the worst thing that could be lost. "That it?" she asked, going back to her food. "Yeah," Sume sighed. "Am I still going to get my puppy?" Kiba asked, his eyes wide and pleading as he looked at his mom. Sume just rolled her eyes. "Don't worry, all this means is you get second pick instead of first. And I'll see if the brat will let you have first pick." Kiba smiled and went back to breakfast, happy with what the situation turned out to be and certain his mom could get him the first pick back. She was so strong and scary, how could she fail? "Brat?" Hana asked, curious about the term her mother used for the person that won the puppy. "Yeah, we had a few new players," Sume said, going back to her food, feeling a reprieve from her immediate family and hoping the rest of her family was as understanding. One of them was that Naruto Uzumaki Kid. Kid has some crazy good luck. Got multiple 4-of-a-kinds and finished the night with 5 aces. Sume looked up at Hana and a grin grew on her lips. "Hey, Hana." "No," Hana said without waiting for the question. Sume pouted. "You didn't even wait to hear what I was going to ask." "You wanted me to break the news of your loss to the clan," Hana said flatly. "Actually, that is a good idea," Sume admitted to herself. "But I was actually going to ask if you'd be willing to trade teaching the Naruto brat how to properly take care of a dog in exchange for your brother getting first pick." "Why me?" Hana asked, ignoring the pleading look her brother was sending her way. "You are focusing on veterinary care and won't be leaving the village much, so in your downtime you can teach him and make sure he won't do anything stupid," Sume said, happy to have found a way to protect the pup and keep from hearing Kiba whine. "You are still telling the clan about how you lost one of the pups," Hana said, agreeing and getting a smile from Kiba. "Damn," Sume said, not wanting to have to tell the clan that. The Haimaru triplets meanwhile were laughing at Kuromaru's soon-to-be misfortune. Kuroda was asleep on his couch where a friendly, neighborhood Anbu dropped him off. He was not needed for the meeting at noon and a note had been left on his coffee table explaining what he had promised Naruto, along with what little money he had not lost in the deed to his shop. A little girl with brown hair shaped into a pair of Chinese-style buns was sitting behind the register, in order to help her uncle run his store. She usually helped out the day after he goes to play the not pointy or explodey game he sometimes goes to play. She liked helping because she got to spend time around all the pretty sharp things he made and he usually taught her about how to play with the sharp things and occasionally how to play with explosions. He always said that he was teaching her to be safe and what to do if she faced it after she leaves the academy she would be entering soon. Shibi Aburame was at his clan compound enjoying a meal and explaining his perspective of the previous evening's festivities to the rest of the clan. The words used were carefully chosen so the maximum amount of information would be shared in the least amount of time. By the time he would leave to help the Hokage mediate the discussion on Naruto's winnings at noon, the entire clan would know with precision what occurred and would carefully spread the truth to counteract the rumors. The logic of the clan put the majority on the side of Naruto, with the only dissent coming from those pointing out that Naruto was too young and lacks any official decree that he is an adult in spite of his age. The dissent was quickly silenced when it was pointed out that it was in many ways an officially unofficial council meeting and the councilmen, women, and the Hokage all let Naruto play. The Aburame conclusion: in order for no one to have committed a crime, Naruto was to be an adult in the eyes of the law from now on. The Aburame would subtly help him adjust to sudden adulthood. Anko Mitarashi was happy waking up this morning. It was so rare for her to wake up feeling another in her arms and her sensitive areas being rubbed. Lightly moaning and coming out of a dream involving Kurenai, slave costumes, candy, a guy that must have had a horse in his ancestry, and the smell of the color pink, Anko's eyes fluttered open to see where she was. Her slow thoughts were, definitely not my bed, too soft and comfy. So, not my bedroom. Kurenai's face is peacefully sleeping there. Maybe I should wake her with a kiss. Sheets have vines with roses on them, so Kurenai's bed. Don't let her know this isn't the first time I've been in her room. Perhaps I had my wicked way with her. What happened last night? Oh, yeah, the poker game. Must have won a lot and we had a victory celebration. Feels like someone is rubbing their face in my chest. If cure. Threesome? Kinky. Oh yeah, people got bet. Maybe I won someone. Let's see who it is. Anko looked down with a dreary smile on her lips that froze and turned to a look of fear as she looked down at a mop of short blonde hair. Shit, she muttered, causing Kurenai to stir awake. Hokage will have my head mounted and my ass on a plate if he thinks I'm doing anything inappropriate with the brat. Master brat. Stupid Orochimaru, getting a representative for pedophilia. I know you lack anything close to a drive unless it'd give you more power. Anko? Kurenai muttered. What ma do owing? She moaned. Nothing, Anko answered nervously as she used all of her kunoichi training to switch her chest with a pillow under Naruto's head and her body out of his possessive arms. She really needed to see about reviewing certain aspects of kunoichi training if it took all her training as it is to get out of the grips of an untrained, 6-year-old child's grip. Safely out of Naruto's grip, she went to help Kurenai get out of the bed as well. Somehow, Naruto's leg got in between Kurenai's and was very high up, exciting Kurenai a bit. Anko helped Kurenai lift her leg up and carefully moved Naruto's leg off the other. Brat, master, whatever, is going to be a menace to society in a few years, Anko mumbled to herself, Kurenai still too out of it to hear it. Kurenai was not much of a morning person when able to relax at home without caffeine. Kurenai safely out of their new master's limbs, Anko began to look around the bedroom, confirming her earlier suspicions that it was Kurenai's room with the red curtains, white comforter with green vines and red roses all over it and the matching silk sheets. Spotting her skirt on the doorknob, Anko quickly grabbed it and slipped it on. No need to flash the brat, master brat. Anko really need to get used to that. Not that this was all bad. She had a master before. A right bastard of a master, but a master. And the feeling of liberation of not needing to make the big decisions was all right with her. Oh, and Kurenai agreed to servants' outfits. Anko knew just the thing and it would be perfectly acceptable for going out in public, at least by Anko's standards. All she'd need is to talk Master Naruto. Starting to get used to it, and then get a tailor to work on it. Anko giggled. There already is a tailor that is going to make outfits for us. Free clothes. And dressing up Kurenai in servants' outfits. Anko's giggling got stronger, stirring Naruto a bit from sleep. Old man, we having fish ramen? MHH. Smells fresh, Naruto sleepily said. Already giggling, Anko lost all remaining control at that comment from her new master and fell on her rump hard, laughing out loud, waking up Kurenai fully. Anko, what are you doing? I had the strangest dream. Naruto rolled over and snuggled up into his new sister. Anko, that was a dream, right? You didn't lose me in a game of poker and then molest me in front of half the council, did you? There's some completely innocent reason that there is a 6-year-old in my bed. And that there are wet patches on my sheets, right? No dream, Anko began answering perkily. I did lose and molest you. We just slept with the brat. That still sounds bad. Anyways, the wet patches can be blamed on me. They aren't all mine, but I'll accept it. Kurenai simply glared at Anko. The Anbu sent to check up on the players that stayed at the bar shook his head at seeing the depressing sight and pulled out the memo from the Hokage with instructions when he comes across certain individuals. Stepping up to the Ino Shika Cho trio, the Anbu made his presence known. "Excuse me sirs, but you are required for a meeting at the Hyuga mansion. I would advise you to take these tablets to help sober yourselves up." The Anbu handed the 3 small black pills made of a special mixture of herbs, sealing, and special charcoal that would help clear out the alcohol in their systems. After the trio took their pills and took a seat to sober up, the Anbu added, "You may want to hurry and leave to the Hyugas. I saw Yoshino coming this way and she was looking upset about something." "What a drag," Shikaku said, getting up and leading the trio in fleeing the area as quietly and stealthily they could, taking a path to the Hyugas that misses the 3 shortest routes from the Nara household and the bar they were at. The Anbu went over to a slumped over for of Fugaku Uchiha and nudged him awake. "Wake up Chief Uchiha," the Anbu said, the smile in his voice at knowing Fugaku wasn't going to have that position long unnoticed by anyone due to no one being sober enough to pick up on it. Fugaku grunted looking at the Anbu with what was clearly a hangover pill and a glass of water. "Get up, sir, you have a busy day ahead of you," the Anbu said, showing some sympathy by keeping his voice down. "You need to be at the Hyuga mansion at noon for a meeting with the Hokage. Bring your wife." Fugaku shot standing up, aggravating his headache, his Sharingan spinning at full speed for a moment, but when it stopped, his red eyes had a 3-point star that curved inwards from start point to star point and the pupil of the eye was a red dot in the center of the star. The feeling of loss of his life's works, his wife, and the general feeling of utter defeat had upgraded his Sharingan into the Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku began his walk home, a dazed look on his face, and the hope he could get a suicidal mission from the Hokage. Or that someone would just go ahead and stab him in the back. Sir," the Anbu said, nervously. Fugaku turned to the Anbu, his Sharingan still very visible in its evolved form. "Your eyes," the Anbu pointed out to Fugaku, pointing towards a small, decorative mirror nearby. Fugaku lightly touched underneath his eyes and smiled softly, sadly. Even this small victory of achieving the Mangekyo without someone close to him dying could make all he did lose worth it. Naruto didn't want to wake up. Wherever he was sleeping was warm, with a softer bed and covers than he'd ever experienced before in his entire short life, and he felt safe. Protected. If this was a dream then he never ever wanted to leave it. He'd rather stay in blissful sleep than leave this dream. "Master Naruto," whispered a voice close to his ear. A voice that sounded familiar, but it was too much hassle to remember where from. He'd rather keep sleeping than try to remember. Instead he burrowed down under the covers into the warm, comforting embrace. "Wake up, Master Naruto," the voice said again and a finger poked gently against his cheek. He opened his eyes reluctantly and saw a pair of red eyes staring down at him from a pretty face that he had only seen properly last night. "Sis? Good morning, Master Naruto," Kurenai told him. "Did you sleep well?" Naruto blinked. "It wasn't a dream? I've really got sisters? Yay!" He shouted and jumped right out of the bed and onto Kurenai, who staggered backwards under the unexpected impact, barely getting her arms around Naruto to stop him falling to the floor. "Sis Curry," he said happily, rubbing his cheek against hers and giving her a nickname that only would make sense to someone too young to fully speak the language. Anko stood in the doorway and chuckled at the way Kurenai's eyebrows were twitching. "Getting all maternal already, Curry?" Anko asked, deciding to adopt her master's nickname for her friend. The smirk was wiped off her face as Kurenai pried Naruto off her and held him out towards Anko. "Give Anki a hug too, Naruto," she told him and Naruto quickly complied. Anko froze as she felt the little boy wrap his arms around her neck and he had to hang by his arms for a moment before the kunoichi closed her arms around him, taking a lot of care not touch him anywhere that the old man might object to. She didn't really give a damn about what most people thought, but the Hokage had taken a chance on her after her last master was caught messing around with babies and she wasn't going to screw that up. If that meant she had to play wet nurse to a brat, she'd find some way to start lactating. Speaking of questionable medical procedures involving breasts, where was Tsunade? It'd be useful to know that if she would need such a complex surgery. In a casino far from Konoha, Tsunade, the blonde-haired, huge-breasted medic, was losing money. Her apprentice, the black-hair, kind-faced Shizune, was trying to convince her to stop, and Taunton, their pearl-wearing pig, was eating a truffle she found. If Tsunade or Shizune had paid attention to the cute little piggy, they would have seen it was a rare white truffle worth Tsunade's cup size of pure gold. Sadly, they were too focused on the money Tsunade was losing to pay attention to the snacking pig. Hiyashi Hyuga was having a horrible morning. He was hung over because the Hyuga don't keep anything to help with hangovers because that is beneath them. Number 1 reason he hated being a Hyuga at the moment. Number 2 was that it was Hanabi's nanny's day off, and Hiyashi couldn't find anyone to take care of her for the day. A 1-year-old was not what Hiyashi needed when he had a headache and had a meeting coming up that would make the Hyuga elders upset. Today sucked for Hiyashi, especially with that annoying pounding. Wait, that isn't his head. That's the sound of flesh hitting wood. Following the sound, Hiyashi came across his nephew training. Hanabi's fussing made Neji pause and turn towards the source. "Ah, Neji. Would you mind looking after your cousin today?" Hiyashi said in a way that Neji knew he couldn't refuse. "I have a meeting at noon and need to get ready for it." Neji gave a nod, withholding his anger at the situation, as he came over to take Hanabi from his uncle. "Yes, uncle. I'll make sure Hanabi is taken care of." Back at Kurenai's home, the only 3 that were at the previous night's poker game and came out without any concerns were having a healthy breakfast, despite a very brief complaints from both Anko and Naruto who wanted dango and ramen, respectively. Kurenai's argument was simple and effective. She wouldn't be living there much longer and didn't want to just waste the food she already bought. "So, Naruto, why are you calling us your sisters?" Anko asked, teasingly. "We are your servants, so you should be calling us things like slave, bye." Anko. Kurenai quickly intercepted what she knew what Anko was about to say and didn't want to have cursing around a kid so young. "I've always wanted a family," Naruto said with big pleading eyes, looking at the 2 kunoichi and missing the near swearing. Not that it would have been a bad influence on him. He's heard worse. Hearing the sweet comment made the 2 women, trained to kill in cold blood with no mercy, coo softly and pull their master and unofficial little brother into a hug. Naruto was happy and felt very safe and protected in the embrace of the 2 women and was beginning to associate his head in women's breasts to safety. Something most guys associate with either danger or pleasure. Danzo, the old crippled man, was currently spending the day as he usually does, making sure Konoha thrived. Currently, he was doing so by reading over reports. The rumors of what had happened the previous night only just beginning to spread around town, so he had no idea how much he had truly missed and what he could have had the chance to win. Most likely lose, considering the frightening luck Naruto displayed, which Danzo had made a note to check to see if that luck was some sort of natural thing, or if it was merely a fluke. If it proved consistent, Danzo would have a new theory of how the balance of luck truly worked and that all of Tsunade's good luck went to a different, much younger, blonde. None of this is really important and the theory is wrong. Tsunade just sucks at gambling. The Hokage was on his 3rd cup of triple strength tea. One of the secret blessings the Hokage had for being so old was that he lost a lot of his sense of taste and could swallow things most others would find too bitter or powerful. The blessing is all the caffeine he was able to get into his system to keep him going. Contrary to some belief, the Hokage does not have any mind-altering drugs in his pipe tobacco. Instead, he has a specially ordered blend of tobacco from the hidden grass village, Kusagakure, that was soaked in caffeine to further help him keep going. The Hokage was on his 4th refill of his pipe. The messages for various factions, including the bank to pull up the accounts of the players who had not been able to redeem their stakes, have been written and sent out. Now all he had to do was gather the paperwork and head over to the Hyuga mansion. Fugaku arrived home, his eyes back to black. Itachi was away on a mission and shouldn't be home for another week, and Sasuke was already at a tutor's, minimizing who he had to inform the bad news to. Sadly, his wife was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea already made and her blade sitting next to her place. She wasn't looking pleased when Fugaku stepped into the room. She wasn't actually pissed about anything in particular. She just felt the desire to be pampered a bit. Seeing the way Fugaku flinch made her believe he had forgotten something and would give in to the pampering. Fugaku swallowed before opening his mouth to speak. "I guess you heard," he said, thinking she had somehow found out about how he had lost her in the poker game. He wasn't as concerned about her being angry about the loss of the military police, but he felt sure he'd soon be running to protect his manhood. Heard what, dear? Makoto asked in a far too sweet voice. Alarms were going off in her head and she was beginning to get pissed. If he cheated on her after all her loyalty, she'd gut him like a fish. That I, lost you in last night's game? Fugaku said very quickly and flinching. He had some advice on women he hoped he'd be able to tell his sons. Namely, don't go for kunoichi above chunin rank. They get too frightening at such ranks. What was that? Makoto asked, having easily broken down what her husband said, but wanting to be sure she heard right. The betting got pretty high last night, Fugaku started explaining in fear, feeling the killing intent coming from his wife in full force. The Hyuga mansion was on stakes, along with probably the biggest pot of the last few years, a few people, custom weaponry, among other things. In order to match the bet I had bet both you and the military police. Makoto's eye twitched and began reaching for her blade. Who did you lose me to? Your answer will determine how much I cut off, she said, pulling her tanto from its sheath. The Uzumaki brat, Fugaku said, backing up and trying his best to remember what her feelings for the demon child were, praying they were positive for some reason. Makoto smiled lightly, knowing Naruto was the child of her dearly departed friend. You get a 3-second head start, Makoto said. Being required to take care of her friend's child was not a bad thing. But her dear husband wasn't getting away unpunished. Brat, I think we should probably get going, Anko said after making sure that only the brat and Kurenai saw her go all girly with Naruto's comment about wanting family. She felt comfortable giving anyone that thought to harm her new master and little brother a rusty kunai colonoscopy, and would just stab them if there was any doubt about her being the toughest meanest. Okay sissy Anki, Naruto said, stopping Anko's train of thought. Kurenai had a small smile as she saw the way Anko froze at her nickname. Yeah, sissy, let's get going. She teased with a laugh as she picked up Naruto and started off towards the Hyugas, knowing they needed to get there soon if they were going to be on time. Best to teach Naruto early to be on time so he didn't end up like a certain someone. Strolling along a path back to the village, a day late and still a day away, a man, with the only distinctive features being his silver hair, his forehead protector covering one eye, and the fact he had a mask covering the lower portion of his face, yawned as he read from a vibrant orange-colored book. The poor bastard didn't realize how different his village would be by the time he arrived. Most of the people from the previous night were currently in the Hyuga meeting room. Notable exceptions was the weaponsmith, the only civilian that was still asleep, the rest not wanting to miss the action, Naruto and his first pair of servants, Fugaku Uchiha and his wife, and Hiyashi Hyuga. Hiyashi was in a private meeting with the elders of the Hyuga clan and a few other important Hyugas, both branch family members and main house members. All of them were in their formal robes and seated on the floor of the side meeting room on their knees, looking very formal and serious. The fact that no one had pupils and it was hard to make out where any of them were looking made everything more serious. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Hiyashi began, bowing low in a show of servitude, causing a few eyebrows to raise. An acceptable show of emotion for the Hyuga. I have called this meeting to discuss some changes that will be happening due to losses of the poker game last night. The air suddenly felt as though it dropped a few degrees and Hiyashi felt even more nervous, even though he did not show it at all. Go on, one of the elders ordered frostily. Let me begin by saying that Anko Mitarashi and Naruto Uzumaki joined in the game last night with Anko bringing Kurenai Yuhi as a guest, Hiyashi said, causing several unraised eyebrows to raise now. Anko, at one point, when she was low on money decided to bet herself and Kurenai. Mr. Uzumaki, with his damnable luck, won them. The rest of the Hyugas remained silent, waiting for Hiyashi to get to the point that affects them, many of them noticing the term of respect Hiyashi used for Naruto. That was the first of the interesting bets that night and pretty much set a precedence for including interesting bets, especially as we drank more. One of the elders held up a hand to stop Hiyashi from going on. What exactly did you lose? The elder asked, not wanting this to be dragged on longer than need be. Hiyashi sighed. All my losses were to Mr. Uzumaki. I lost 2 Hyuga maidens, the mansion, and I had put up the hot spring as collateral in hopes of getting my losses back. If we can get 500,000 ryu, we can buy back the hot spring. Silence followed Hiyashi's statement. Hiyashi took a deep breath in to add in another point. My daughter Hinata will of course be one of the 2 maidens, But I ask that Hanabi not if for no other reason than she is only 1 year old. Hiyashi was bowed over, his head on the floor, waiting for the verdict. After a pause, one of the women of the main branch chose to speak up. I will nominate my daughter if the caged bird seal is not applied to her, the woman said, thinking of her sweet little girl who is currently going to be married off to one of the branch house men and become little more than a maid, housewife, and slave. She'd rather see her as a slave and maid of the demon brat, but in branded and free of the caged bird seal than to see her still in the family and branded with that accursed seal. Many of those in the room turned to the woman and Hiyashi showed a small, but thankful, smile. Thank you. I will do my best to make sure Kaharu is treated well, Hiyashi said, not wanting anything to happen to his own daughter, and feeling it was the least he could do to make sure that another put in such a position is treated just as well. With that, the Hyuga meeting was called to an end. Hiyashi began to head towards the main meeting room, his spirits high, when he heard a little girl scream. Wait, that was too powerful to be a little girl. Must be a man afraid for his manhood. Hiyashi smirked as he shook his head and went to open the front gate for Fugaku and his wife. Fasta sissy. Fasta. Naruto yelled happily as he rode on Anko's shoulders as she ran along rooftops. The snake bitch of Konoha was smiling as well as she kept a grip on Naruto's legs to make sure he stayed on her shoulders. Kurenai was only thinking about how one of them was going to be a horrible influence on the other. And she had no idea which one would be the worse influence. Thankfully, she could be the mature one of the group. Hopefully she'll be a good influence on the two. Anko suddenly stopped on a roof near the Hyuga compound. Look, Master Brat, your new home, she said, glad that Naruto was alright with being called a brat, as long as she called him Master first. Naruto smiled wide, looking at the mansion, bouncing on Anko's shoulders. All of that is mine? Naruto asked cheerfully. Yes, Kurenai said, a soft smile on her lips at knowing she wouldn't have to worry about rent again. And after this meeting we can go to the orphanage and get your things. Naruto pouted at the thought of going back to the orphanage. Do we have to? Naruto asked. Can't I just enjoy what I got and not go back? Anko sighed, knowing where the kid was coming from, not wanting to go back to the orphanage herself. I'll watch the kid while you get his things, she offered, looking at Kurenai in a way that left no room for argument. Alright, but we have a meeting to get to first, Kurenai said, jumping off the building and walking towards the gates in front of the Hyuga mansion. Anko following with Naruto smiling like the happy little kid he was. Walking up to the front gate, the Kunoichi were slightly surprised to see the gate open until they saw a Hyuga with his eyes active bowing at the gate. Welcome. Follow me to the meeting, he said in a crisp tone. Naruto did not notice the tension leave the trained warrior he was riding on as she realized that it was just a Hyuga seeing through walls, choosing to just smile his friendly smile at the Hyuga, trying to shrink down and hide behind Anko's head. Kurenai noticed Naruto's reaction and smiled at him while reaching up to stroke his hair to comfort him. Naruto relaxed a bit and smiled at Kurenai. Waiting in the meeting room, the Hokage sat doing some last-minute organization of the papers he had. He simply figured it would be best to go through the list in order of who were able to pay back first, then those less likely. Hiyashi Hyuga sat to the side of the Hokage to show that this was still his home. The other side of the Hokage, in the spot of importance, was empty and waiting for Naruto and his girls. Next to Naruto's place was Mikoto with her hand on her sword where it was stabbed into the floor between Fugaku's legs. Fugaku's eyes were still wide in fear and the knowledge that he was being forced to pay for the damage and that the floor would end up costing a lot. The rest of the council was around the table, waiting. Some patiently, some nervously, all wanting to know what would result of Naruto's winnings. A few planning on selling the information to others. Everyone looked up when the door opened to see Naruto, Anko, and Kurenai come in, walking over to the empty spot at the head of the table that the Hokage was motioning them to. The door was quietly closed behind them. Sit, sissy, Naruto said with a smile, causing a few chuckles and Anko to get an eye twitch. Why you brat? She asked, forgetting to call him master for the moment. I was told I have to sit on you to keep you out of trouble, Naruto said with a wide smile, making Sume howl out in laughter, rolling on the ground, knowing it was her suggestion that the kid was remembering. Shikaku lazily hit Sume to get her to stop, knowing it was less of a bother to snap her out of her laughter now than to wait for her to finish and pay attention. Bastard, Sume replied, sitting up and getting ready to attack Shikaku right back. "Sit Sume and we can begin this meeting," Sarutobi said in a serious tone and waited for everyone to be seated and comfy before starting. "Okay, as we all should know, this meeting is to discuss how those who lost in last night's game will repay their losses to those who made out like bandits." A pause was made as many of them looked towards the youngest person in the room in his stained shirt as he squirmed uncomfortably in Anko's lap, his head in between her breasts and his head being petted by one of the scariest people in the village. "Anyways, I got a copy of the current amount in the personal account of the ninja that played last night and did not buy back their stakes," the Hokage began. "What?" Fugaku yelled, starting to stand until the feel of the blade between his legs pressed against his crotch, making him sit down with a light, cold sweat. "It is a legal thing the Hokage may do when it comes to the ninja in his service," Shibi Aburame said in his monotonous voice. "He cannot access the funds, but he may deposit money into our accounts, pull up the current balance, and check our balance history." Several of the shinobi gaped their mouths at Shibi, not having known that. "He is correct. That has been in place since the first Hokage for Black Ops and to look for traitors in the forces," the Hokage said with a nod. "Any of you that disagree with that can bring it up during an actual council meeting." Seeing no arguments, Sarutobi continued on. "Let us start with someone that did not bank any properties, Fugaku Uchiha." Everyone paused to look at Fugaku as he cowered from his wife's glare. "You bet your wife and command and control of the military police and lost both to Naruto Uzumaki. Makoto, would you mind removing your sword from between Fugaku's legs now?" Anko, Naruto, and Sume each snickered at the question, the kunoichi showing they had the maturity on the level of a 6-year-old prankster. Makoto rolled her eyes as she pulled the blade out of the floor and moved to sit closer to Naruto, who reached out to hug Makoto. Makoto allowed herself to be hugged and everyone got a shock at Naruto's first words to her, even those that should have expected it. "I got a mommy now," Naruto said happily as he buried his head into Makoto's chest. "Right. Anyways, Fugaku, since the military police is under my purview, even if it is independent organization, I am going to have you be Naruto's second in command until such a time he can be trusted to take over full control. Essentially, you will be doing the day-to-day operations and teaching Naruto to take over for you." The smirk on the Hokage's lips showed that he knew this was just further punishment on Fugaku and that he was going to enjoy the whole Fugaku dug himself. Fugaku merely groaned in reply and set his head on the table. As Naruto let go of his hug and went back to sitting in Anko's lap, reminding her again he was supposed to keep her out of trouble, making her pout. Next is a request of Sume about the conditions of her loss. "Sume, you have the table," the Hokage said before looking at Naruto to make sure he was paying attention. "Thank you Hokage," Sume began before looking at Naruto. "I know I promised you pick of the litter, but I was wondering if I could trade that for the second pick and training from my daughter in how to care of the puppy." Naruto took on a thoughtful look and turned to Kurenai, the one he recognized as being the responsible one. "Sis Curry, what do you think?" he asked, not sure. Kurenai simply shrugged. "Well, it's not like you'd know which is the best pup anyways, so go for it." Naruto smiled as he turned to Sume and nodded his agreement. Sume muttered under her breath that the brat's luck would probably still get him the best puppy, but at least her own brat will be happy. The next few were civilian losses and setting up when Naruto would come to redeem them. It was decided that the outfits would be ordered in a few days and the vacation would be in a month so those going could enjoy the beaches during summer. And then came the ninjas that put up properties into the bank. "Let's begin with Choza," the Hokage said, having his information next in the stack anyways. "You put up half a dozen restaurants up for 1,000,000 Ryo. According to your current balance, you lack the funds to buy all of them back. You do have enough to buy back 5, or you can save some of your money and buy back less. Whatever you do not buy will be put up for the rest gathered to purchase with Naruto having first pick." "Why does the brat get first pick?" one of the civilians asked loudly. "Simple. Mr. Uzumaki was the one to break the bank. This meeting is in part to be able to pay all of Mr. Uzumaki's winnings," Shibi said with Sarutobi nodding. Choza sighed and looked at the restaurants he had put up, choosing to not take back the one that was currently not doing so well. It was a bit out of the way and was actually not a restaurant, but a cafe and bakery that came from far away. "At least my sweet, delicate wife won't hurt me since I got back her favorite places to eat," Choza muttered as Inoichi patted his shoulder. As a reminder, you do owe an all-you-can-eat style feast for Naruto and his new family, and Naruto already has the deeds to the stalls you bet as well, Sarutobi said in a calm tone. A light smile on his lips at seeing how everyone seemed to be respecting Naruto, even if it wasn't in the way the fourth Hokage wanted him to be. When would be a good time for this to be done? He asked both parties. Naruto talked with his new mother and sisters, his voice loud, but everyone not in the conversation pretending not to be listening in. A few of those gathered when he mentioned the nice ramen man and his daughter were like family and he wanted them to come so he can give them one of those stall thingies, and Sarutobi felt a swell of pride that Naruto mentioned he was like a grandfather to the boy and wanted him to come too. How does the Saturday after this one sound? Choza asked, pulling out his planner and seeing there was nothing planned for then. You should have your new clothes by then, and that will give us time to discuss the menu. At the women's urging, Naruto nodded his agreement. Let's see, next is Inoichi, the Hokage said, causing the blonde-haired man to sit straighter. You lost the creation mindscapes to Naruto and 4 of his choosing, your Icha collection. I'll be looking after those till he is old enough, Anko interrupted, a bit of drool hanging out of her mouth at the thought of reading them. And I'll be looking after them till you are responsible enough, Anko, Kurenai said, hitting Anko lightly on the head. With Makoto being the secondary one to keep an eye on them. Makoto smirked to herself, not admitting she would read them herself. Why don't I get them now? Naruto asked with a pout. They are adult literature, the Hokage said. Don't worry, you'll get them when you are an adult yourself. I'll even see if I can get the writer to sign them for you. Anyways, how about we take a short break to get something to eat? I'm sure all this talking has gotten a few of us hungry. We will reconvene in an hour. Naruto nodded his agreement, not noticing the way the Hokage skillfully changed the subject so that Naruto wouldn't complain about not getting his new books. Naruto was happy to be getting things and felt that this was the best day of his life. With a general murmuring of agreement from around the table, everyone got up and headed out to find something to eat. Hiyashi led the Hokage, his soon-to-be landlord, and his soon-to-be landlord's servants to the dining hall for their meal. The meal was a rather simple affair of white rice, broiled cod, steamed veggies, and green tea to drink. Kurenai was thankful for the food. Makoto and Sarutobi were respectful in getting their servings. Anko complained about how bland the food was and why the brat still had to sit on her lap. Naruto reminded her that it was so she wouldn't cause trouble like he was told. Anko groaned and dropped her head while the others at the table held back their laughter. Naruto ate all his food, just happy to being fed twice in one day. While they were eating, Koharu came in and bowed before Hiyashi and Naruto, having gotten an explanation of the situation from her mother, and was happy to not get that seal she had seen used on others placed onto herself. Naruto, I would like to introduce you to Koharu, one of the 2 maidens I lost to you, Hiyashi said in a calm voice, indicating the girl that was 3 years older than Naruto. She has been taught how to take care of a household and how to behave in a proper manner for a maid. Treat her well and you will undoubtedly have a maid for life. Koharu smiled kindly at hearing the head of her family show such concern for her. Why would I treat her bad? Naruto asked. Old man always told me to treat others fairly. Hiyashi and Makoto looked at Naruto with a strange look, knowing the sorts of pranks he did. The Hokage just sighed and put his head into his hand. Anko snickered, understanding exactly why Naruto did his pranks. Kurenai just rolled her eyes and hoped that the 2 of them could be controlled somehow. Thank you, Master, Koharu said. Is there anything I can do for you, Master? Naruto started to shake his head, but Kurenai interrupted, yes. If it isn't too much, would you go get Naruto's things from the orphanage? Especially his files. I'll get right on that, Koharu said, bowing again to Naruto before exiting the room to do just that. Naruto yawned and snuggled up to Anko's body, his head resting peacefully on her breasts. Sissy comfy, he mumbled aloud, getting smiles from everyone except Anko, who instead pouted. The petting of his napping head proved she wasn't truly upset. Naruto was still happily napping with his head on Anko's chest as everyone gathered back into the meeting hall to continue the discussions. Deciding to just go through, as quietly as possible, through those that put up properties into the bank. Most of those gathered were happy to find the brat wasn't going to be buying a bunch of properties, making him some sort of one-man merchant guild that controlled half the shops in Konoha. Instead, he'd have first buy at a fair number of stores and locations and had a chance to actually set himself up to have a pretty easy life as a civilian. Although, considering he was a boy that was going to be surrounded by ninjas, a very cool-sounding job, he'd probably still end up at least training in some of the ninja arts. And none of them planned on stopping him. The fact that he was going to be surrounded by kunoichi that could be extremely frightening had nothing to do with it at all. Nope, not at all. Okay, that was the entire reason. If Naruto had only won money and properties, or even civilian girls, then there would be a conspiracy to block Naruto from entering the academy and sabotage his education if he still got in. Him having 3 kunoichi, the lowest rank being known for putting people into illusions that make a person taste fear, hear pink, smell music, see pain, and feel cheese. A horrible thing that was now used occasionally as a torture by the Torture and Investigation, or T&I, department when they were just assigned to torture someone, kept the majority from planning to go against Naruto and try to advise others not to either. Anyways, most of the rest of the properties were handled, Hiyashi being able to buy back the hot springs he had put up. After Shibi calculated out how much was still owed from the bank to Naruto, Shibi was pleased to announce that Naruto only had to buy 1 property for the bank to pay out his remaining balance. That would mean that all the others with chips remaining would have to buy properties to recoup their chips, however. This announcement brought forth an argument that woke Naruto up. He pulled on Anko's coat, nearly showing off more than was decent, in order to get her attention. "Sissy, what's going on?" he asked sleepily. Anko and Kurenai had been in a hushed conversation during the arguing over what would be best for Naruto, and them by extension. When pulled out of the conversation, Anko decided to go with her gut on what to do. "Say you'll buy the extra properties, Naruto," she said with a smile. "I'll buy the extra properties?" he said in a confused and sleepy voice. Anko just looked at the Hokage, who gave her a disapproving look. Even though he thought the suggestion would be best, the way Anko got him to go with it was not something he approved of her doing. "Are you sure, Naruto?" the Hokage asked in a concerned voice, wanting confirmation before going through with it. "If Sissy thinks it is a good idea, then sure," Naruto yawned as he nodded his head into Anko's breast, closing his eyes again. Lucky bastard, the Hokage thought, not for the first time that day. Turning his attention to the rest of the table, he silenced everyone with a secret technique he only taught to a select few. The big head jutsu was just the right combination of random and sudden to generally silence a room full of people, but could not be overused or it would lose its effect. Applying the technique, the Hokage yelled at everyone to shut up before he discussed what Naruto had just woken briefly to agree to. That left a few pouting. The rest would soon join the pouting, if they were not too prideful, as the paperwork came out that had to be filled, signed, and sent out, in triplicate. The Hokage glad that all he had to do to make the forms official was to apply a stamp that he had brought with him. It filled that dark evil place in his heart to watch others suffer the wrath of paperwork. Kaharu arrived back at the newly renamed Uzumaki apartment. Naruto did not actually know what an apartment was, just that it was a place he would live in after leaving the horrible orphanage according to what the Hokage once said, so he had decided to call the mansion he lived in an apartment. No one could talk him out of it, and Anko had encouraged him, having decided that it was a hilarious idea. She was still on the ground laughing when Kaharu returned. Kurenai was the first to notice the blood splatters Kaharu had on her clothes. Closer examination showed that she was unharmed, 2 rather thin files in her arms and a pissed look on her face. "What happened?" Kurenai asked quietly, glancing over to Makoto. Luckily, Naruto was too busy poking a stick into the laughing Anko to notice his other kunoichi. Kaharu simply handed Kurenai the files. Both were marked Uzumaki, and this was all they had on Master Uzumaki, she said. Kurenai frowned, opening the nearly empty medical file. The only thing in it was a picture of Naruto as a baby, his facial marks on his cheeks visible even then. The care file was not much better. All it said was the Hokage looked in on the kid. "Keep him alive. Is the blood from the orphanage?" Kurenai asked softly, not wanting the smiling young boy to hear her. Kaharu nodded. "I feel I did not do enough to show how displeased I am with how they had treated Master," she said simply, the expression on her face blank. Kurenai and Makoto looked to each other and with an unspoken conversation, nodded their heads. "Don't worry, I'm sure that it was a good start. We'll be able to handle it from here, Kurenai said, and yet her eyes still glowed in rage. It was a simple illusion Kurenai had mastered long ago, knowing her red eyes could even instill fear into an Uchiha. Of course, there, Master, broke the mood. Is Sissy alright? Naruto asked, starting to get worried about the way Anko was still laughing, her face turning red. This didn't stop him from poking her with the stick. Makoto was sitting in the Hokage's office, her former husband seated as far as he could from her and the Hokage behind his desk. The topic of discussion, their children. Specifically, where they would be living. Itachi was the easy one to figure out. Since he was a ninja and legally an adult, he would choose where he lived. Sasuke's fate, however, was up in the air. Sarutobi was honestly wondering why he had to handle such a domestic case, even if both parties involved were his ninjas. In the end, Sarutobi decided it was best to put the decision off for now by letting Sasuke choose who he wanted to live with. That satisfied both for now and got them out of his office. Back at the Uzumaki apartment, Anko and Naruto had a few scrolls in front of them, some crayons, and were coming up with what to make the sign above the gate look like. Anko had the spelling down, but had a difficult time staying in the lines she had made. Surprisingly, Naruto's suggestions actually looked like pieces of art, but he had trouble getting the symbols to look right. Kurenai was helping him with his spelling as best as she could, while Naruto teased Anko about her bad drawings. Anko just stuck her tongue out at him in reply. In another part of the mansion, Hiyashi, having still not heard the new name of the mansion, was having a talk with his daughter, explaining the situation. Little Hinata was having difficulty understanding just what her father had done, but knew that he seemed to regret it and that it involved her and someone named Mr. Uzumaki. She was patting his shoulder when Kaharu came in, her blood-stained uniform replaced with a fresh one, and bowed. "Excuse me, sir, but I thought you might like to know the new name of the mansion," she said with a smirk, liking her new master more by the moment. "Go on," Hiyashi said, thinking he was prepared for it. "Uzumaki apartment," Kaharu said. Hiyashi blinked, opened his mouth, blinked again before getting up. "I think I'll just go ahead finish moving into Hizashi's room," the Hyuga head said, exiting the room as he tried to process this new development. "Kaharu, what did Daddy mean me being Mr. Uzumaki's maiden?" Hinata asked after her dad left the room. Kaharu took a moment, pondering how Master Naruto had treated his servants, and then how he would think of Hinata. She leaned over and smiled at the younger maiden. "It is a fancy way of saying you are his playmate and will be joining in the games he plays from now on." She was glad to see the small smile on Hinata's lips as the girl thought about having someone to actually play with. She had had no one to have fun with ever since cousin Neji's dad died and he became so cold. After a few arguments, the new sign was decided. It was simple block lettering on a rectangular sign board, that was to be stained a dark color with the lettering painted bright orange. Naruto was adamant on there being orange on the sign, but Kurenai had been able to talk him down to just the letters being orange. Getting up, Kurenai took Naruto's drawing and said she'd go see about getting someone to make it. She knew a few people that could do the work for cheap. Naruto nodded in agreement while Anko smirked, ready to implement her little plan now that she was alone with her new master. "So, brat, have you thought about what kind of uniforms we'd be wearing?" she asked with a smirk, figuring she could manipulate her charge to go with something to her liking. Something slinky with lots of mesh. Naruto's face contorted in thought for a moment. "Orange," he declared in a very serious tone of voice. The word seemed to hang in the air for a moment. "Orange?" Anko questioned. "That's it? No styles or lengths or anything? This could be good or it could be bad." "Bets on bad." Naruto nodded his head with a smile. "Well, I don't know about all that, but I like orange." "Orange is a stupid color for a ninja," Anko said derisively. Who had ever heard of an orange ninja? The reaction was instantaneous. "No, it's not. It's an awesome color," Naruto yelled, jumping up and staring Anko down. If it weren't for his diminutive stature and acrobatics, he might have made her flinch with the glare he was giving. "Still, time to nip this bud at the vine." "Yes it is. How can you be stealthy if you are wearing orange?" Anko asked. She tried applying to the boy's common sense. "You're just a walking target unless you are in a pumpkin patch or something." Naruto pouted. "I can be stealthy in orange. I can prank the whole village in orange," Naruto boasted. Anko raised an eyebrow. A bad idea formed. "Oh yeah, how about a bet? If you can prank the whole village while in orange, I'll wear a completely orange uniform. If you can't, I get to design all the outfits. There was no way the brat could pull something like that off. Deal, Naruto agreed, putting his hand out to Anko to shake on it. Anko did, and they nodded before they started to head out of the mansion, Naruto going to get ready for a village-wide prank, his mind churning away at ideas. "Sissy, what's a pumpkin?" he asked, his mind going back to the word he hadn't heard before. "It's an orange squash thing from the north," Anko explained with a shrug. "Make some good soup and pie." Now a little backstory is needed for why Anko's bet was a horrible idea. Specifically how Naruto came into pranking. It was a few years ago, back when Naruto was still always stuck in the orphanage, often getting ignored by the workers. One day, he saw one of the older kids pull a somewhat simple prank that caused a lot of the other kids to pay attention, as well as all the workers to go straight toward him. Naruto decided he wanted that attention, even if it meant getting in trouble. A week later, he pulled his first prank, got in trouble, but also got the attention he craved. He had decided that it was worth it. Ever since then, Naruto would pull pranks every so often, finding just getting people to notice his pranks made him feel nearly as good as the attention he received. He would even avoid being punished if no one caught him in the act. So, the 6-year-old began to set them up more and more stealthily in order to not get caught. He even began to pull pranks on ninjas, not because he thought it would be more challenging, but because they were an available target. The fact that they were more challenging and often caught him just made the stubborn kid want to try to successfully prank them more. Anko knew none of this, having not crossed his path before since he began pranking. The village was large enough, and she had never been terribly interested in anything that wasn't dango or booze. All she had heard were a few rumors every now and then, dismissing them every time, not even paying any attention to them. That night found Anko getting a tattoo on her perky and firm butt that said, "Property of Konoha's Prankmaster," in carefully stylized, orange-colored letters that when casually looked at made it seem she had a seal placed there. Anko did not need to do this, but felt that since her last master left his mark on her, her current master deserved a specially placed mark of ownership. The title was something Anko decided to call Naruto after seeing how he chose to prank the entire village. She had no idea where he had gotten whatever he had put into the water, what he put into the water, or how it was able to turn anyone's tongue who drank the water, or had something with water in it, like soup, a rather vibrant orange color. Thankfully, the medic nins managed to find what was causing the sudden oranging of the tongue, determining it was mostly harmless. It was activated by enzymes from people's saliva to stain the mouth, and thankfully would clear up in 2 days. The only reason Anko even knew Naruto had done this as a prank was because she saw him leaving the water treatment facility, after 2 hours of searching for the brat. Naruto got a mild talking down to from the Hokage, respect of several ninjas for being able to sneak in and pull the prank off, added hatred from a large section of the village for the prank that they panicked over, and the reward of getting Anko to admit that bright orange can, somehow, be a stealthy color. Anko still had a bad taste in her mouth from having to admit that, but could see no way to argue against the proof of an untrained brat managing to hide from her sights while she did her best to keep an eye on him, sneak into a heavily guarded facility, and release something, all for a prank. Maybe there was a reason no one had seen Orange Ninja before. The Hokage sat in front of all the ninja that had been on duty at the time at the treatment facility, glaring at them all. "How could you all let an untrained child into the treatment plant?" he asked in a serious and cold tone. What if he had been an enemy ninja? He could have been dumping poison or water-borne diseases into the village's water supply instead of simply a harmless little prank. None the ninjas in front of the Hokage replied. They were too terrified to even notice that the Hokage himself had a particularly brightly colored tongue from large amounts of tea he had been drinking to get through the day's paperwork. "I believe that this calls for some serious action," the Hokage continued on. "All of you are to have your skills revalidated and any deficiencies either trained out of you, or you will be put somewhere you can be useful." The Sandame smirked at the next line he was going to give. "I could always use a new person to separate all this paperwork for me." The smirk grew wider. Nearly half of those there shivered at that thought. The other half would have if they had any less control over themselves. Naruto happily played ball with his new friend and companion, Hinata. They were simply kicking and tossing the ball that Naruto had found in one of the storage rooms. Koharu had then introduced him to his other maiden, suggesting that the two could play with the ball in the training field towards the center of the house. Koharu sat off to the side, supervising the children while Anko was doing whatever she had chosen to run off to do, and Kurenai and Makoto were doing a bit of interrogation of certain people suspected of neglecting Naruto. Everything they did had the Hokage's seal of approval. No child should have been so poorly cared for, no matter what they might contain. Especially when the one that put the whatever into the child was a foremost expert on seals and other seal masters were around to make sure the seal wasn't failing. Then again, people can do silly and irrational things, like pulling really heavy things with their crotch. Or jumping off a two-story building into a dumpster. Those things are nasty, unhygienic, and usually have something sharp, pointy, or otherwise painful to land on, not just a bunch of empty cardboard boxes or mattresses. Better to try to hit the ground in a somewhat safe manner and deal with a broken leg or concussion than getting scratched by a sharp piece of something covered in all sorts of nasty diseases. Another silly thing would be getting a tattoo on your ass saying you belong to a little kid and not realizing that inappropriate rumors will start from it. Speaking of Anko, her ass was now pain-free thanks to a little bit of medical chakra the tattooist used to make sure the tattoos don't get infected and reduce the recovery time of someone with a fresh tattoo to nothing. It had the added benefit of allowing the fresh ink can be removed or moved slightly if any mistakes were made. After about 2 weeks to a month, the tattoo is, more or less, permanent. With the tattoo completed, the kunoichi decided to commence in one of her favorite activities, getting drunk while eating dango. Usually this would be followed by her talking with those she was able to call friends. In other words, those that did not hate her for one reason or another and overlooked her flirtatious ways. Tonight was more of a contemplative night, however, as the light sting that was still there from the tattoo kept reminding her she had gotten one, made her think about her master. Fucking brat and his damn luck, she muttered, refusing to believe that he slipped out of her sight from any amount of skill he might have, choosing to put it to luck. Luck and the 40 minutes she spent going through shops, brothels, and strip clubs, thinking those were the most likely places a young male kid would go to for pranking supplies or after pranking jollies. Anko had been way off the mark since Naruto was still a little kid and didn't know about such things yet. And judging by the 2 bags of toys Anko had bought, as well as the bra, panties, speedo, and jock strap she hadn't gone thinking solely of where a kid would go, but where she would go if she was able to get into any place and was male. Well, maybe not male so much as if she was able to get into any place. Not that she hadn't been to those places before. Either way, she learned the first lesson of dealing with Naruto. Don't bet against him unless losing is to your profit as well. As a bonus lesson, she also learned that Naruto was very skilled at pranks and could probably be taught to be an amazing trap master. The week following the poker game was filled with the buzz of rumors about what the outcome of the game would mean for everyone. One rumor in particular was the way Anko seemed to happily lose herself to a kid, even if it was the demon child. Anko was oblivious to the rumors about how she seemed to have taken after her former master's interest in children and that she was using the child to scratch an itch she had. This had a rather nice effect of the mothers around town taking pity on Naruto more and seeing him less as a demon and more as a victim. They still wanted nothing to do with Naruto, but were more likely to look at Anko with extra venom and Naruto with pity. Naruto was also being rumored to now being the richest person in the village. This was completely false, as Naruto wasn't even the richest child in the village. That honor belonged to a young genius orphan whose parents died 2 years previously on the way to a business deal with a shipping company CEO. The kid was currently doing a very impressive job of running his family's publishing company. Naruto, however, was the second richest kid in the village, seeing as very few children actually have money of their own. This rumor would have resulted in severe price gouging, if not for the simple fact that Kurenai had Koharu do most of the shopping for him and made sure to watch over Naruto when he did go out to shop. Then there is the rumor slowly spreading from the Aburame clan about Naruto legally being an adult. This fanned the flames of the Anko being a pedophile rumor and made it seem like she was simply a clever pedo by making her little boy toy an adult in the eyes of the law. Since Naruto isn't an adult by age, by being a registered ninja, or by having been tried as an adult for a crime, he is still viewed as a child in the eyes of the law for the moment. All the other rumors were about the various people that lost properties. The most entertaining of the false rumors was that Fugaku Uchiha was castrated by his ex-wife after telling her how he lost her in a poker game. The week also had Naruto and his lovely, to various degrees, female prizes getting fitted for new outfits. Naruto's only stipulation for the women was that Anko's had to be fully orange, like she promised. Anko pouted, but went along with it, knowing there was no way she would be able to get out of it. Anko's outfit ended up a rusty orange-colored mesh armor bodysuit that hugged her curves beautifully and doubled as support for her ample bosom. This was partially covered in a dark orange, nearly skin-tight pair of pants with cargo pockets designed to hold weapons and a dark orange, nearly brown leather overcoat. Naruto was a little upset that the outfit had no bright orange in it, but agreed since the deal was for orange, not a specific shade of orange. Kurenai went with a style of dress she had seen on a mission, customized a bit. It was a white dress that looked like it was made of very broad bandages with a rose's thorny stem in the middle. Underneath she wore an orange mesh armor blouse that only had one long sleeve. To complete the outfit, she would wear bandages on her upper thighs and forearms. Makoto, for her one outfit she was allowed to get, chose to get a kimono made that was patterned to look like the sun was setting over a forest, the sun on the back and stylized to look like the Uzumaki clan symbol, a red spiral within a black-rimmed, white circle with 4 small black triangles at the top, bottom, and both sides of the rimming. Kaharu went with a simple black dress with the Uzumaki clan symbol on the left breast, an orange apron and hairband, and a simple pair of black shoes to look the part of a proper maid. No frills were added at her request, wanting the outfit she got to be simple, durable, and inexpensive for when it came time to buy more or a larger-sized version. Hinata, after being fussed with by the other girls and generally being made to try on different things before a comment made by Naruto led to Hinata admitting that she didn't have any clothes meant for playing, was given a child's play kimono made out of a sturdy cotton material, colored orange with red lines that crisscrossed to form a diamond pattern and a red sash. Naruto happily went along with being dressed up by the girls, finding joy in all the attention they were giving him. And the fact that he was being complimented for being better behaved than Anko. After many outfits, ranging from an orange jumpsuit that Anko vetoed, explaining to a pouting Naruto that it made him look like some sort of convict. That led to Kurenai explaining what a convict and a prison were to Naruto, who nodded in understanding. Then what was I convicted of to end up in the orphanage prison thingy? Naruto asked. Of being a brat with no parents and a demon in your gut, Anko snarked without thinking, before palming her face as she realized what she had let slip and what law she had broken. Naruto looked at Anko in confusion while Makoto and Kurenai were simply gaping at Anko's stupidity and lack of restraint. Hinata was distracted looking at the different fabrics the tailor had while the tailor was mutually distracted explaining about the different fabrics and patterns to the young lady. Kaharu stood quietly, staring at Anko for an explanation. What do you mean sissy? Naruto asked Anko who sighed in defeat. Anko started unsure before Kurenai came to her aid. Ramen, Kurenai suddenly said, getting Naruto's attention on her. We'll get some ramen after this if you don't push this topic. Naruto looked at Kurenai confusedly. Why? He asked, wondering why they wouldn't tell him. The Hokage wanted to be the one to explain. Makoto added in, seeing what Kurenai was doing to save Anko's ass and not wanting to miss out on that. Putting the blame on her boss was just an added bonus. It is just a rather delicate topic and he was unsure of how to explain it. Don't worry, he will soon enough. Naruto nodded his head, still a bit confused by what his nice ladies were talking about. So, the old man will explain with ramen? Naruto asked, his mind mashing everything together. Sure, Anko said, going with the ass saving she was getting and not wanting to rock the boat. Naruto smiled and started to hop in excitement. Well, let's hurry up. Ramen is waiting, he said before Anko hit him on the head. Calm down. We'll go when you get a new outfit, Anko said with a roll of her eyes. Naruto nodded and began to try to rush the outfit picking until he came out wearing a black suit with a skinny black tie and a long-sleeved orange shirt. Kaharu nodded approvingly, Anko frowned, thinking something was missing. Makoto was looking after Hinata as she looked around the store, feeling bored, and Kurenai put a hand on her chin. Snapping her fingers, Kurenai grabbed a black fedora off a wall with sample hats and placed it onto Naruto's head. Nodding, Kurenai smiled, thinking the look was finished. Still missing something, Anko complained, looking around till she saw an Abarame working to spread the truth, as that clan saw it, as he did his shopping. Not that she knew what he was saying. Sunglasses. He needs sunglasses and the look will be finished. The tailor looked over to Anko with a deadpan expression. I don't sell sunglasses here, but if you are all ready, I'll get started on making your outfits, he said, his notepad open with nearly indecipherable notes written down that explained what the ladies wanted and the different measurements of the group. He quickly wrote down the specifications of Naruto's outfit, namely the cut of the jacket and pants, the color of the clothes, the style of hat, color of hat and hatband, and that no extra accessories were to be added to the outfit, getting the agreement of the ladies that the hat didn't need a feather or something. The tailor also wrote down the style of shoes he'd have to get the cobbler next door to make in the size of Naruto's foot. But before you leave, Mr. Uzumaki, you need to change out of my sample and then come over here so I can get a proper measurement for that noggin of yours. Naruto smiled and quickly did as asked, wanting ramen and soon. Anko slid up to Kurenai and Makoto and softly thanked them for saving her ass. Kurenai simply waved it off and replied, you would have tried to do the same. I don't want you to, but I know you would have tried to help. Makoto waited for Kurenai to walk off before patting Anko's ass. Don't worry, you'll pay back in full, she whispered darkly before walking off herself. Fugaku's week was going horrible with the guilt of what he did, especially considering that in terms of money, he had come out ahead. The eyes of those looking at him made the guilt worse and feel like he had truly sullied the name of Uchiha. Fugaku spent the week going to various locations to do a few small things, like update his will, check up on the military police, cancel the current coup plans due to the changes caused by his mistakes making it too risky to follow through with, and pay off an old debt of his. After setting all of that up, and sending Sasuke off to his tutor and to spend the night with his mother at Uzumaki apartment, Fugaku wrote a simple note to the Uchihas in general that stated what he hoped they would do in renouncing all of his positions as unworthy and irresponsible as his drunken bets proved. He placed the note into an envelope, sealed it with a wax stamp, and setting it onto a table nearby. Next he unsheathed the ceremonial and very sharp sword, placing the sheath carefully in front of himself before placing the tip of the blade to his gut. Father, Itachi said in an uncharacteristically emotional tone of voice at seeing his father ready to commit seppuku. The blade sunk deep into Fugaku's gut before Itachi could do anything to stop it, only making it to his father's side to be there as he expired. Itachi, Fugaku said in a pained tone, I'm sorry. You are in control now. Don't make my mistakes. With his last strength, Fugaku gave his son his final, and very soft, smile and showed his son his Mangekyo Sharingan before closing his eyes for the last time and lying down to bleed out. Itachi was simply stunned at what his father had done, unable to move for several moments. Word of Fugaku's death would spread quickly once Itachi gained control of himself and got some of the police to investigate. When the Hokage got word of what happened, he would determine that there was a conflict of interest with the Uchiha being the only to investigate the death and would send 2 Anbu to help with the investigation. The autopsy would show that Fugaku had taken a mild pain reliever and had a bit of alcohol in his system, most likely to calm his nerves at ending his life. The Anbu would get a copy of the note, with no complaints of the Uchiha after all parties read what was written on the note Fugaku wrote. Makoto would go to the funeral, but chose not to speak so that any anger she had over Fugaku losing her in a game of poker would not spoil the mood. Sasuke would choose to live with his big brother, not fully understanding why his dad had died. No one outside of the Uchiha family was allowed into the funeral, even the Hokage, in order to keep it to just the family. Going back to a brighter time a few days prior to the suicide, Naruto was happily explaining the wonders of ramen to Anko while eating bowl after bowl at one of what Naruto would consider a secondary-grade ramen stand. There were quite a few people with their mouths open at such a small kid describing how the quality of the broth is the primary determination of the quality in any soup. The thing that truly separated and made ramen superior was the noodles, specifically the kansui used to make the noodles, which is essentially just a mineral water that gives the noodles their yellowish hue and distinct flavor and texture. Different shapes and lengths of ramen noodles lend themselves well to different soups, but the noodle dough is the true secret to good ramen. The rest is just about making as good a bowl of soup as possible, or whatever noodle dish is being made. The audience listening was surprised at the vocabulary and knowledge this little kid had on ramen, even if he had trouble saying many of the words correctly. They were also impressed at the nutritional information he provided by explaining how the noodles are a good source of carbs and the rest of the dish provides the other nutritional benefits or lack thereof. Anko was silently planning on how to convince the kid about the wonders of dango when all she had to go on was that it was tasty. The owner was surprised at the kid's knowledge of ramen was greater than his own and how much the little guy could put away. The stack of empty bowls was already taller than Naruto. And he made a rather filling ramen. After finishing his latest bowl, Naruto leaned back into Anko's chest, closed his eyes, and began to softly snore, causing Anko to roll her eyes and silently curse Sume for putting the idea into Naruto's head. Picking the short blonde up, she looked at the others in the group. "I'll take Shorty here home. I'll see the rest of you later," Anko said, shrugging her shoulders and letting Naruto use her chest as a pillow like he had been for the past week. The little brat seemed to find a lot of comfort in sleeping on breasts and found Anko's especially comfy. After getting back to the Uzumaki apartment, Anko strolled happily past the Hyugas that are now just tenants in what was still not on paper an apartment complex. She snuck through a kitchen to snag some cookies and milk under the pretext that they were for Naruto as a snack. Really, Anko just felt like having cookies and milk while Naruto slept on her. Kurenai never let her have cookies and milk anymore because it would ruin her dinner. At least Kurenai had given up on getting Anko to cut back on dango. The following morning, very early in the day, Naruto woke up feeling something small and rough on his face. Wiping at it, the small things moved off his face, some landing in his mouth. Tasting it, Naruto found it tasted good and sweet. Sorta like cookies. Stirring, Naruto looked around his room that had sunlight from the sunrise sneaking in enough to give him light to see. He saw that he had slept on Anko that night and she had a little white mustache on her upper lip and crumbs around her mouth. Leaning in, Naruto began to lick his big sister's face, liking the taste of the cookies and the trace taste of milk that remained. Anko moaned at feeling the movement, having a rather nice dream. At the licking of her face, her arm moved around the head of Naruto and pulled him in for a full-on kiss, Anko still mostly asleep. As her eyes slowly opened, she saw a familiar face that she was kissing and blushed deeply at realizing what she had been doing with her 6-year-old master. Letting go of him, Naruto pulled back and smiled. "You taste yummy, sissy," he said happily, before leaning in for one last lick at some more crumbs before curling up on Anko's chest for a little more sleep. Anko laid back, eyes wide open, afraid to move or do anything. Maybe she'll wake up from this nightmare if she hopes enough. Awake yet? Damn, Anko really did kiss her extremely too young master in a full-on, explore the mouth, kiss. And she liked it, not good. When Kurenai came into the room a couple hours later to see Anko laying down with an arm around Naruto in what looked like a sleeping position, she first thought it was a rather sweet scene. When she got closer and realized Anko was both awake and had a guilty look on her face, she decided to investigate. "What did you do?" Anko started, gulping down and gathering her courage. "I might have been dreaming a rather nice dream and ended up waking up enough to pull the brat into a kiss while still out of it." Kurenai gave Anko a deadpan look, clearly exasperated. "I didn't mean to," Anko said nervously. "Don't hate me. It was a dream." Anko closed her eyes, waiting for what Kurenai would do. "At least you both are wearing clothes," Kurenai said. "Now get up and ready, we are going to the blacksmith to see about the weapons. And I swear to Kami that if you start pleasuring yourself with the new kunai again, I will turn you into a living body pillow for Naruto for the next 3 years." Anko simply nodded and whimpered like a whipped dog. Sometime later, after a nice filling breakfast, Naruto was riding Anko's shoulders as Anko, Kurenai, Makoto, and himself headed towards Kuroda's shop. Naruto was happy, Makoto and Kurenai were feeling good, and Anko was nervous and noticing the extra heat in some of the looks she was getting, making her feel worse about the early morning kiss. Arriving at the shop, the foursome saw little Tenten was helping to clean the shop while Kuroda restocked the display cases. Hearing the bell, Kuroda looked up and got a serious look on his face. "Tenten, sweetie, mind flipping the sign to close? I think these customers are here to order some very customized weapons." Tenten nodded before bowing to the customers and turning the sign around and locking the door. Kuroda, meanwhile, began to put together the field kit, as promised. in front of their eyes so they knew that he was not short-changing them. Naruto, the little kid he was grinning as he looked at all the sharp instruments of death. Anko, the little kid she mentally was grinning and drooling at all the sharp instruments of death. Kurenai, the responsible adult she was keeping Naruto and Anko from cutting themselves or cause damage in the shop. Makoto was actually inspecting the items being put into the field kit critically, finding it all at a very good standard of quality. After gathering all the items for the field kit and showed them to Makoto, Kuroda packed them away very carefully. One fully kitted out, high-quality field kit, packed and ready to go, he announced, handing the packed kit to Makoto. "Follow me, and we can talk about what I'll be making for you." The whole group moved into the back of the shop and Kuroda put on a kettle onto the stove to start making tea. Gathering around a table, the six sat down and Kuroda started the conversation up. "So, Naruto, who will be getting the weapons?" "Me and my sisters, cause they're the best sisters I could have," Naruto said with a wide, innocent grin before he found his head back into Anko's cleavage. "I love this kid, you know that?" Anko said with a look that seemed to be a mix of pure joy and the feral lust of battle. "You're suffocating the kid," Kurenai said with a roll of her eyes, causing Anko to let go of Naruto. Kuroda laughed good-naturally. "Alright, how about the easy one first?" he said, getting up and going over to a drawer of drawings. Flipping through them quickly, he pulled one out and placed it onto the table. "How about this, Ms. Mitarashi?" he said, showing off what looked to be a drawing of a pair of gloves with claws at the end of the fingers. "You use poisons, right?" Anko nodded, looking at the claws and thinking of all the ways she could make use of them. "Well, these should be good for a poison delivery system, and I should be able to create a way for it to hold multiple sealed poisons and release them as needed," Kuroda explained before going into the more technical side of the gloves and how they could be set up. As he did, Anko added in her 2 cents now and then, grinning and drooling lightly at the thought of the damage she'll be able to do with these new weapons. Especially once she got very proficient in using them. Once Kuroda mentioned that he could make the claws retractable so Anko could wear the gloves regularly, Anko squealed, hopped over the table, and hugged the blacksmith. "I'm going to love these things," she said after being pulled off the man and put under Naruto because she clearly still needed someone to keep her out of trouble. Her arms were around Naruto's waist and she was purring softly at the thought of the modifications to her fighting style that would make her more dangerous than she already was. "So, how about you, Ms. Yuhi? Do you know what kind of weapon you would like made?" Kuroda asked, curious what the genjutsu mistress would like. Kurenai bit her lower lip in thought as she considered the question. After a minute, she looked up. "A Fuma shuriken. Add whatever specials you think will work on it," she said, deciding to go with something simple that she could easily use without learning a new style, and with all the specialties it'll have, won't be mixed up with any of her other weapons. And still be relatively easy to hide. Kuroda nodded and took down some notes. "I'll do a bit of research and check with you before including anything." Kurenai smiled and nodded her thanks before Kuroda turned to a grinning and eager Naruto. "You get nothing right now," he said to the kid seriously, raising his hands in surrender before continuing. "I cannot, in good faith, make you a weapon you are not ready for. Feel free to buy some practice swords if you don't have one, but I won't make you a weapon of such quality until the weapon is proven to be right for you. The fact that in a few years you will be bigger is only an additional reason not to give you a weapon yet, because it would end up being sized too small when you are an adult." Naruto pouted, but Anko's stroking of his head helped keep him from blowing his lid. "I'll remember this. When I am older, I will have my sword," Naruto said with conviction. "Get up, you dang brat," Anko said, shaking the sleeping form of her master, snuggled up on top of her. "Kid is cute, but I am starting to get annoyed with him," she added under her breath. "Comfy," Naruto said with his voice muffled by Anko's chest pillows as he pulled the comforter further over him. "Brat," Anko said loudly, smacking Naruto over the head. "Get up, we got a lot of shit to do." "Anko. Language," Kurenai said, slapping Anko upside the head from where she was next to her on the bed. "Naruto is only a kid. We have to be a good role model." From the doorway, Makoto rolled her eyes. "Yeah, and hitting each other is a real good role model. Now you three, get up, dressed, and ready. I need to pick up my sons for the party this afternoon." Pushing off of the door frame, Makoto left, leaving behind the 3 younger ones to leave. When she opened the front door, she stumbled back at seeing Sume there about to knock on the door. Sume was in her usual outfit with an added dog collar with a tag that simply read, "Stupid bitch." After a brief chuckle, Makoto asked the important question, "So, Sume, what are you doing here? Today seems like a good opportunity for the lucky brat to get his puppy." Sume answered with a light growl as she scratched under the collar. Makoto raised an eyebrow at noticing the collar. Clan said I was still partially responsible as alpha for losing the pup. Thankfully, I only got a mild punishment and am still alpha. Makoto nodded with a smirk, keeping her chuckling at Sume's misfortune in her head. "Well, go on in," she said, letting Sume in before telling her how to get to the room Naruto was in. Sume nodded and began to follow the instructions. Thankful it was pretty straightforward to get to Naruto's room. "Damn it, brat. Get back here and put some damn clothes on," Sume heard yelled from the room. Anko. Language. As Sume got closer, she heard giggling and sound of little feet running around with the soft sound of a trained ninja that wasn't trying to be stealthy chasing after. Opening the door slowly, she saw what she thought she might. Anko in just her mesh underclothing chasing after a Naruto wearing just socks over some rather ornate rugs in a bedroom. Kurenai was already fully dressed and ready for the day, watching the running around happen. Anko was focused on trying to catch Naruto. Naruto was giggling like a loon, having fun at being chased by his sissy. "You get used to it," a Hyuga said, surprising Sume. Looking at the Hyuga that surprised her, she saw it was a rather old branch house Hyuga. "Might I suggest waiting at the breakfast table for them to finish up their morning play?" Sume simply nodded and followed the Hyuga, mentally reviewing what she knew about Anko, the brat, Kurenai, and the Hyugas. Especially the Hyugas for just accepting such behavior to happen in front of them. What Sume didn't know was that earlier that week, Naruto had come across a main branch Hyuga trying to have his way with one of the branch Hyugas. Naruto didn't like what he saw, so he kicked the man in the shin and told him to get out of the house. The main branch Hyuga tried to attack Naruto right when Anko came around a corner. The funeral was quick, quiet, and covered up with impressive efficiency. This led to the Hyugas looking at Anko as being Naruto's attack dog and not wanting to make Naruto sicker on them. Especially after what she did with that man's arm and throat. Sume sat calmly at a rather beautiful block wood table, polished smooth with a glossy finish as a few Hyuga wearing orange clothes emblazoned with Uzumaki apartment in fine script. A suggestion of Kaharu since Hinata and her were the only Hyugas that would stay at the former Hyuga mansion since they were owned by the current owner. The rest, especially the branch house members, were trying to earn their keep by doing odd jobs around the mansion. Mostly, it was what they were already doing, just in new clothes and having louder people running around. After about half an hour and a strong cup of black tea, Naruto bounded into the room to sit down at the head of the table. "Sissy, if you are good, I'll stop sitting on your lap." Naruto called back as Anko came in, followed shortly by Kurenai and Hinata. "About fucking time," Anko said, getting wrapped upside the head by Kurenai. "You're just trying to get Naruto to curse, aren't you?" Kurenai asked, starting to resign herself. "Who, me?" Anko asked in far too innocent a tone and with far too innocent eyes. "Is Sissy being naughty?" Naruto asked. "Yes. No. Sit," Naruto said, standing up and pointing to the spot he was just in. Anko pouted but complied before looking over at noticing some snickering. "What are you doing here?" she asked Sume. "Letting you know that the puppies are ready to be picked out," Sume said, smirking at how Naruto began to bounce on Anko's lap, remembering how uncomfortable that could be. "Goody," Anko deadpanned, giving Sume the stink eye. "We'll be by later today," Kaharu said, coming into the room, looking at a clipboard. "Either after breakfast or between 1 and 2. Sound good? I don't have anything to do this morning, so I can wait," Sume answered. Kaharu nodded. "Now, what shall we have for breakfast?" "Pancakes, dango, ramen." "Naruto, you can't have ramen every meal," Kurenai scolded Naruto. "Anko, you can't have dango every chance you get." "Hinata, we are going with your suggestion." Hinata smiled and clapped lightly in joy. "Very well." Kaharu made a few notes before heading off to let the chefs know. After a rather interesting breakfast for Sume and one that was rapidly becoming a normal morning in the Uzumaki apartment, the group went to the Inuzuka compound. Sume was telling the others about how they should go about taking care of the puppy. especially one that will grow up to be a ninkin. Naruto kept asking questions that Tsume was fine with answering. They got to the compound and Tsume led the way to where the puppies, her son, and Hana were, waiting to get this over with. "Alright, here are the puppies," Tsume said as she returned the hug her son gave her. "None of them have names yet, so you two will be able to name the one you get." Tsume let the pair into the area set up for recent litters and the mothers and watched as they went about choosing. Kiba ended up choosing a white puppy that had brown on its ears that he decided to call Akamaru. Naruto, on the other hand, chose a black puppy, the runt of the litter, and as he gave it a hug, called out, "I'ma go and call you Kitty." Kitty gave a happy yap in return while Tsume facepalmed. Hana smirked in vindication as she looked at her mother, and those not distracted by all the cute puppies just sighed in acceptance. Anko began to chuckle as Naruto and Kitty played. "I really do like that brat. He never stops surprising me." Eventually the group made it back to Naruto's mansion, informed the Hyugas there of the slightly odd choice of name he gave his puppy. Several of the more traditional members, even those that liked Naruto, had a bit of an eye twitch from annoyance. They were not going to say anything, but that did not stop the fact the name was rather silly and, in some opinions, incredibly stupid. The fact Naruto is just a little kid made it a bit easier to deal with. Naruto, after getting back, rushed to help set up a place for Kitty to sleep and to show Kitty where she could go to the restroom. Anko ended up quietly going off and having a long, formal, and rather quiet tea ceremony with some random branch house members in order to calm herself after watching how quickly Naruto taught Kitty to use the toilet. That was not something she expected to see. Especially to see a dog use toilet paper to wipe itself. After that rather strange training session, Naruto, Kitty, Hinata, and a few other kids went out to play while a few adults kept an eye out for them and planned out the night events. The menu was already set up, heavy on the dango, red bean, and ramen due to a vocal minority that was half made up of the one who earned the dinner and half made up of Anko. Thankfully for most of the rest, Kurenai and Makoto managed to get something more well-balanced added in, as well as a wider variety. The elder Hyuga really made it a point to eat as balanced as possible and follow their doctor's recommendation. It helped to keep the old traditions around when there are plenty of older people that follow the old traditions. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.